Good evening, everyone. It's 5 p.m. We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. If you will, please join us in the invocation and the pledge. Gracious Heavenly Father, we bow before you tonight. We call on your name and just ask you to be present with us. Just guide our hearts and our minds and our actions with all the decisions that need to be made here tonight for the citizens that we serve. Just ask your special hand of protection over those in our community, our first responders, our military, to keep us safe. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, welcome. Thank you for joining us here tonight. We have several opportunities for you to participate. We have a citizens to be heard at the beginning, another at the end. You can speak on either one of those items at your choice. You can also speak on any individual agenda item. If you will, fill out a speaker card with Miss Jessica for each item that you want to speak on. And when you come up, if you give us your name and address, speaking to the microphone. There are cameras here, folks watching at home as well. We want them to be able to hear everything that goes on. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda? Make a motion. Second. And no add-on, correct, this time? All right. Have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimous. We'll start out with citizens to be heard. Start out with Marguerite McClure. Come on. Come to the microphone, if you will. Introduce yourself and give us your address. And each speaker has 3 minutes. Miss Jessica has an alarm that'll go off at the end of 3 minutes.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask if the gas station had already been approved that would have been erected over the Chips Hole area.
No, it hasn't. No.
It has not. So I wanted to propose that not be approved because it's over such a vulnerable area, whereas Chips Hole waterway directly connects to Wakulla Springs that was recently discovered by divers. So I think it would be a real dismal event if that water was polluted by gasoline. That's all I have to say.
And we do as well. Thank you. Thank you. And Anna Garner. So Anna Garner.
Good evening. I'm a recent resident here. I moved here from New Mexico. I should say I escaped, but I'm here now. I love it.
Well, welcome.
Thank you. I attended the same talk that Marguerite attended recently, put on by geologists and people who know about the underground caves and the water connectedness. I didn't know that. It was quite fascinating. And I'm very concerned about a large gas station, any gas station, being over Chips Hole because of the connectivity it has with the rest of the underground caves that supply this drinking water to Florida. And one contamination into Chips Hole could contaminate the entire water supply for all of Florida. So if you're thinking about doing relaxed rules or something that might allow commercial endeavors like of the type being proposed or considered, I would strongly urge you not to, and to protect Florida's clean waterway system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. David Damon.
David Damon, Crawfordville. Thank you, Commissioners. So what I want to talk about is, with these new proposed regulations, is a lack of setbacks. And there are no buffers, there are no setbacks for caves or even for rivers. I mean, you can build it right up against the river. And I find that baffling. And we're being told that it's hard to accurately map. Well, that's not exactly true. They can be mapped using a cave radio locator or a CLR, and the WKPP divers placed within a cave or conduit. They've done that with Chips Hole. So I was talking with Dr. Christopher Warner, who did the program last week at Wakulla Environmental Institute. He's the guy in the middle. He's world-renowned and expert on this. And I asked him a simple question: how accurate are the maps? And I've talked to a few of you, and that's been a question. It's a reasonable question. This keeps coming up. He told me that by using the radio beacon device in the cave, they can stand up above on the land with a receiver. And I said, well, how accurate is that? I mean, are we talking about within 50 feet? He said a foot or two. A foot or two. So to suggest that what I keep hearing is, oh, we can't map them. Well, that's not true. FDOT uses their maps. DEP uses their maps. FSU uses their maps. And Northwest Florida Water Management District uses their maps. Why can't Wakulla County use their maps? And why can't we do setbacks? It's ridiculous to be doing any kind of regulations that don't include setbacks. We can put them in there. We can map this out. So, and Hernando County's managed to do it. They use ground penetrating radar. They have a zone. It's called a car-sensitive zone where they map this out, and they've managed to figure out where all their caves, and they include caves in their setbacks. They've managed to figure it out. Other counties have figured it out. Why can't we figure it out? To suggest that this cannot be accurately mapped is not true. So what I'm saying is, let's just hold off on moving this forward until there can be some workshops like we were promised originally by the county administrator, using WSA, the Friends, and Clean Water Wakulla. We're all supposed to sit down and help put this together. None of them, not one of them, was ever reached out to be part of that. Instead, it was done behind closed doors with contractors that were hired, picked by the county and told to do basically minimum standards. So it's time to hold off, don't go forward. Let's think about this. Let's get the people together, some real experts, and let's do something that will really protect Wakulla Springs, because this does not do it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Ms. Jackie Turner.
Good evening, Jackie Turner, 198 Mount Zion. Last time I was here, I sat down and realized I forgot to tell you my name and my address. I first want to say thank you for your consideration of my comments. I appreciate your time this evening. Wakulla Springs is our county's namesake, and it draws visitors literally from all over the world. One might argue it's the main economic engine of the county. Wakulla Spring is already ecologically stressed, and if the proposed amendment fails to protect Wakulla Spring, it would have a significant economic and ecological impact. Florida statutes confer upon local governments the authority to adopt regulations designed to promote public health, safety, and general welfare of its citizenry. And now I understand that you have determined that it's in the best public interest to repeal Ordinance 9428. Your stated goal is to adopt updated water quality protection requirements to better protect groundwater quality from contamination. And I must mention that you have not met with interested local citizen groups who have knowledge and expertise to promote public health and improve the proposed amendment. Before proceeding with this amendment, please workshop with these interested citizen groups like David Damon just mentioned. They have pertinent information which will only make this amendment better. So if we could just take the time to workshop with these organizations, with these citizens that they represent, to get the information that they have. Again, you're going to make the amendment better by hearing from these citizens. It is in all our best interest to protect Wakulla Spring. And I just want to close by saying that the Wakulla County Board of Commission has a history of protecting Wakulla Spring. Many years ago, you joined my husband, Joe Glisson, the Florida Wildlife Federation, and the Florida Attorney General in a successful legal fight to stop Tallahassee's nitrogen contamination of Wakulla Spring. You have another opportunity to protect Wakulla Spring. By not rushing through this proposed amendment, please schedule workshops to obtain the needed information. The potential harm to Wakulla Springs cannot be underestimated. Please protect the international jewel of Wakulla County. Thank you so much for your consideration of my comments. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Donald Davis.
Hello all, my name is Greg Davis. I live at 99 Steeplechase Lane, Crawfordville, Florida. A couple of these things are not going to be specifically related to the issue that was discussed earlier. I just wanted to bring to the attention the board of the new Senate Bill SB 540, and hopefully that gives the county more leg to stand on whenever they go after somebody trying not to do anything. The reason that I bring SB 540 up is I remember being here about 6-7 months ago whenever there was a land use, basically a developer was trying to get into an area. And Mr. Hess was the only one that raised the situation that, hey, this is going to cause a hazard situation. And then the entire board voted to approve it. Dang. I mean, remember what I'm talking about? Well, we can't do questions and ask, so I'm sorry about that. So I'm just saying that hopefully that State Bill 540 gives you more power to go after a developer if they're not have the best use of Wakulla County and its citizens and its future in their sites. I know there was at the same time there was proposed 174 acre subdivision. Am I allowed to talk about this right now?
Anything?
Okay, anything I want.
Sir.
Okay. And then the county says, well, you're going to have to go ahead and make sure sewer's done. Well, they said, okay, well, I'm just going to double the number of homes. And I know that I've talked to several commissioners before, and they're like, they don't really agree with impact fees and stuff like that. But my question now to those same commissioners is, are they okay with not collecting an impact fee for Wakulla County, but allowing that developer to impose on the citizens that move into that neighborhood a $1,500 a year homeowners association fee? If we would have utilized an impact fee for the schedule that we currently have on the books, not one that we need $70,000 to do a study, but one that is currently on the books that can be repealed. It is sitting there, and it was repealed in 2011. If we had went back to that in 2016, we would have recouped as a county multiple $1 million. The reason I say this is not only for the county, for the roads, for the infrastructure. Is that my 3 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Just bring them in.
But also for our children, because having 2 boys, 10 and 12, and playing in sports, it is incumbent upon the parents to finance that. My mother, back in 1980, along with Joanne Strickland, did the grant from Tallahassee for the Med Art Park. So I would like to see the county commission invest in the children and the county. Thank you very much. I love all you guys.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Ms. Kathleen Von Haney.
My name is Kathleen Von Haney. I live in Crawfordville, Florida. I'm here in my individual capacity as a private citizen. The cave maps are in the public domain. On November 7th, 2022, you were given a booklet which contains several of the cave maps that are in the public domain. What you have on the screen before you was in the Rivers Beneath Us presentation, April 25th. I hope those that weren't able to attend in person, you were there virtually. If not, please be aware that GIS technology has improved over the years. You can take this map, put it on against the Google Maps, Wakulla property appraisers, and you can pinpoint locations using this type of map. In fact, in the presentation, an orange pylon was placed on the land directly above where the Chips Hole Cave connection was made, using the technology that David Damon described previously. Next. And when it comes to buffer zones around caves, it has been done successfully with the Florida Department of Transportation and their contractors. The Basin Management Action Plan from June 2018 required them in the 319 roadway construction project to put all of their retention ponds more than 300 feet from any of the cave crossings. These maps from DOT, they were in your booklet from November 7th, 2022. You were asked to share that with your hired consultants. Hopefully that was done. So they're in the public domain. You can pinpoint locations directly above the cave. You can measure buffer zones and setbacks. Last year, you were also given the Hernando County ordinance. You put some catchphrases in there from Hernando County, but you didn't get the meat of the Hernando County ordinance. In the environmental management plan section, it talks about accounting for all karsts and sensitive subsurface features, which may be affected or impacted by the development. The karst management plan shall at a minimum include identification and assessment of karst and sensitive subsurface features, including caves, which may be adversely impacted by the development. The ordinance also contains special protection areas. These are zones around vulnerable features, including caves. The special protection area consists of a setback of 500 feet from the outer boundary of the vulnerable features. Caves are included. The special protection area also prohibits certain activities within that zone, including caves. It includes the prohibited use of petroleum products within the special protection area. Wakulla County can do that. In this county, we have 45 plus miles of submerged caves that feed the water for our drinking water, the spring, the rivers. Heck, we have more caves than Hernando County has, and we should protect them. That's how you protect drinking water, etc. I ask you to do so, please.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm going to submit this over here.
Our citizens to be heard. We're going to go into awards and presentation. We'll hear from our representatives of James Moore and Company, our annual financial report. Welcome.
Good evening, Zach Shalafor, partner, James Moore and Company CPAs. We do have a PowerPoint that we're getting up there. Indy passed out some of the financial statements. There is a little inset there if you want a copy to follow along. As per usual, we'll do the brief, try to keep it pretty quick and high level version. As we go through, please feel free to jump in with any questions as we go. This is our third year working with the county, so I want to, as always, thank the board for the opportunity. A big thank you as well to Clerk James and his team. Steve's here and all of your constitutional officers and their teams for all their help through the audit. There are 6 audit reports that we issue, so every year it's a lot of work, and we always appreciate all of the help through the process. On the first slide, we have a summary of the audit reports. With the same 5 audit reports that we issued this year as compared to last year. The first report, we issued an unmodified opinion on your financial statements, which says that your financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects. This is the best opinion that we can issue and what you want to see here, again, with the primary objective of the audit to be focused on the reliability of the financial numbers. We also performed a federal and a state single audit this year where it's effectively a mini compliance audit over your major grant programs. We had no findings there with regard to the internal controls over those grant programs or any actual non-compliance that came to our attention. The third report, we look at compliance and internal controls from a financial reporting perspective. And if we had any, well, we're not focused, the audit is not of internal controls. If as we're testing financial activity, we see any exceptions where your internal controls are not followed or not designed well, we would have to report those here. We had no such findings noted. There's a management letter we call our Chapter 10550 Auditor General Report. Kind of a catch-all of items from the state, mostly centered on financial condition. If there were any red flags the county hit, we would have to notify the state. Not all the cases will get to the counties in a very strong financial position.
There's also a paragraph there for just any other comments, recommendations, and there's just one other comment this year related to budgetary compliance, not so much on a cash basis, but there was a new accounting standard related to leases. So it's basically the non-cash accounting components of that new standard that impacted that. So we just had a recommendation looking at how that jives with what's formally in the budget. And then lastly, we have to look at the county's compliance with state statutes over investment activity and the use of your E911 funds. And there we did note the county to be in compliance with those statutes. On the next slide, we have a quick summary of all of the 6 audits. As you can see here, we had one other similar recommendation, again, not a major deficiency or concern, but one other recommendation also noted in the sheriff audit, but overall a very strong kind of slate throughout, most notably with no material weaknesses identified across any of the 6 audits. On the next slide, to dive into the numbers a little bit, we have a summary of your fund balance in the general fund. The biggest driver of the overall change here relates to the impacts of your ARPA funds flowing through. But what we always look at here really are the bottom 2 lines, your unassigned and assigned fund balance, which kind of represent the overall residual unrestricted fund balance or reserves that you have in the general fund. Generally speaking, most of your reserves that are, again, unrestricted, those typically reside in the general fund. And the restricted fund balance is about $477,000. There's other restricted funds that the county has, but those, of course, are kept in separate, typically special revenue funds to really have the accountability and transparency in place over the use of those restricted dollars. On the next slide, as we've done the last couple of years, we take a look at your assigned and unassigned compared to what you spent to say, okay, how many months do you have in reserves relative to just what your expenditures were out of the general fund in the current year? Again, much of this increase largely from the ARPA impacts. We're a little bit over 50% now, or 6 months. At 52%, there's a bare minimum recommendation out there from the Government Finance Officers Association that says no less than 2 months, and then consider if you're coastal and what other factors are there that could influence, say, hey, being in Florida, being coastal, that right there is typically at least another month, and from there it kind of comes down to risk tolerance given we've all seen over the years what a hurricane does, how long it takes to get those dollars back from FEMA. But overall, over the minimum recommendation that's out there, moving in a positive direction, which is always good to see, especially the last couple of years with COVID. It was, what are revenues going to look like? Now it's kind of one where what are expenses going to look like? Until you go to the store, you don't know what things cost today, and nobody knows what they're going to cost tomorrow. But as you go into the future, into this summer's budget cycle, moving into that from a very strong position, which is always a good thing. On the next slide, a quick look at your business type funds. We take a historical trend look at your unrestricted net position, really just to identify if there's any major red flags from the operations of those funds. Sewer did decrease, that largely related to the golf course capital investments there, not so much an operating deficit of the sewer activity, so no issues there. And then solid waste for the second year in a row kind of moving in a positive direction. So overall, as we look at those funds, no major red flags that came to our attention. And on the last slide, just kind of a few other items. Your other governmental funds, as I referenced, most of your restricted dollars that come in, those are tracked separately. Your total fund balance in all of those other funds is about $12.8 million, almost a $2 million increase in the current year, and no deficit fund balances. We always look at that to say, is there a negative balance that may have to be subsidized by the general fund at some point in the future? No such items there, so that, again, always a good thing. And then lastly, as in prior years, I do like to touch on the fact that in your financial statements, we see what's called a net pension liability to the tune of $26.5 million. I like to touch on that just because that really is just a theoretical number. I call it an exercise in accounting standards, where every year the state says, hey, all counties, all school boards, everybody in FRS, here's your theoretical share of that FRS unfunded liability. You have to show it on your statements to comply with accounting standards, but from a practical standpoint, a budget standpoint, the liability of the county is that every month, based on payroll, the board, the constitutionals make the required retirement contributions to the state, and that has been done. So
Always like to note that just for the record because it is a large number. So that hits all the highlights. I'd be more than glad to answer any questions, and thank you all for the chance to be here.
Thank you, sir. Any questions, comments? None? Good job. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right, that ends our awards and presentation. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion to approve. Second.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimous. We did not pull any consent items for discussion. We'll go to general business, item number 9.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a request for the board's direction pertaining to the proposed ordinance regarding Wakulla Springs protection regulations and request for approval to schedule and advertise public hearings to consider adoption of the proposed ordinance. Back in 1994, the board adopted Ordinance 9428, which enacted the original Wakulla Springs Special Planning Area. This ordinance set forth boundaries for the special planning area and required registration for facilities containing certain specific regulated substances. Over the years, numerous vulnerability studies, cave diving, dye tracing studies were conducted and caves were explored. As a result of that, in 2008, the board chose to expand the Springs Protection Area, and currently what we have today, that area is still in place. Last year, the board directed staff to explore updates to the current regulations. And in June, staff presented an update to the board outlining concerns related to the original idea of establishing underground setbacks for underground caves. It was at that time that the board directed staff to contract with professionals in the field of geology and hydrology to assist in the development standards addressing issues related to site-specific studies that are needed to identify confining layers and to also determine the vulnerability level of any given site within the Springs Special Planning Area. As part of that direction, the board also directed staff to develop criteria related to stormwater in these areas as well that would be applied to any site in the Springs Protection Zone that may have hazardous materials. The proposed ordinance presented to you this evening can simply be broken down into 3 parts. The first phase being an investigation and due diligence phase, where an applicant would be required to submit site-specific studies to determine the lithology of the subsurface conditions on that site. There are also construction standards that are outlined for housing those materials on the property. And the final step would involve continued maintenance and reporting of those sites. Upon completion of this draft, staff opened a public comment period to engage with stakeholders and solicit input. As a result, staff received a lot of feedback, and some of the recommendations were actually incorporated into the draft that's before you this evening. I would like to point out that both the comp plan and the land development code currently provide additional groundwater protection regulations. These include setbacks from karst windows, the requirement for performance-based septic tanks, regulations relating to landscaping and fertilizers, and limitations on density increases, just to name a few. I would like to be very clear when I say that the proposed ordinance presented to you this evening does not impact nor change any of those standards. It is proposed to be in addition to existing policies and codes that the board currently has in place. At this time, staff is simply seeking direction for any additions, modifications, or deletions that the board would like to see based on the current draft, and also requesting approval to schedule and advertise this for public hearings in the near future. At this time, I'd like to introduce Frank Powell. He's with Terracon. He's got his team members here with him who helped draft and support this regulation that's being presented tonight. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Frank.
Yeah, thank you, Summer. I appreciate it.
Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon, good evening, board and chair. I appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of you. My name is Frank Powell. I'm the senior project manager at Terracon Consultants, Inc., located in Tallahassee, Florida. We do have multiple offices around the state of Florida that have around 370 professionals inside of the state of Florida that focus primarily on the geology, the environment, the facilities and materials management in the state of Florida. With me today, I have Mr. Tom Lewis. He's a professional geologist in Florida. Over to my right, Mr. John Kimberly. He's a professional engineer in the state of Florida. And Mr. Dustin Mills, with a professional engineer also in the state of Florida. Myself, John, and Tom, we live in Leon County. Mr. Mills lives in Wakulla County. So this is near and dear to our heart to work with the Wakulla County and work with the staff that you guys have to build upon what you guys have done in the momentum of enhancing and protecting Wakulla Springs. You guys have done a great job, an omen's work on protecting Wakulla Springs as a whole, from the TMDL, from the BMAP, from septic to sewer projects, all the advanced wastewater treatment facilities that you guys are implementing right now with the state-funded grant opportunities. This builds upon that, as Ms. Summerpell just spoke about. This builds upon the growth that you guys have done and continue to maximize what you guys have done in this particular special area, Wakulla Springs Protection Area. I also see it as a three-phase scenario, and that's the way that we kind of built it, is give you guys, give the planning, give Wakulla County the information needed to make an educated scientific decision on how to approve certain features associated with Wakulla County. This information then gets assembled. It goes through the planning program. If it does get approved through, the planning program and the board, then there's a construction phase that also has a significant amount of monitoring that takes place through that entire process. Once constructed, it goes into an operation and maintenance, both from a regulated substance or a hazardous material or hazardous waste or even a stormwater facility, that goes into a much deeper perpetual monitoring of that facility that's overseen by Wakulla County, overseen by the state of Florida, and if so, sometimes in the federal community also. So I'll stop there, and if you have any questions, I'll be welcome to entertain.
We have a lot of speakers. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Powell before we get to the speakers?
So, as I read this, it's really strong on protecting against leakage at a station, but it doesn't protect against catastrophic failure. How do you see it?
Well, I see it. I don't, Commissioner Hess, I do not see it as an individual facility itself. I look at the all commercial development in this particular area that you guys are trying to protect for Wakulla Springs. I do not see it as catastrophic failure or that being a concern in this particular area. It's an interesting question, because the due diligence that is in this current proposed ordinance is to provide Wakulla County that information needed to make that scientific determination where these karst windows are located at, where these systems are located, so that you can put protective measures, or you can make the educated scientific decision that says, hey, we need to change the type of if we were proposing an underground storage facility, it needs to go above ground storage facility. Or it could even go to the point that you guys can make the decision that, you know what, this is not the appropriate property for any of this type of commercial development.
Yeah, that's. And that's my question, is that, do you think that if you have a facility, an underground feature, that we should be sitting back from it?
Well, as Ms. Pell already spoke, you already currently have setback distances from known systems that are already in your your code.
Yeah, but the only ones that are exposed to the surface. The underground, we have no setbacks for those. Correct? I mean,
That's my understanding.
Additional questions?
I want to make sure, as of right now, I know we talked today, so what we have implemented here's DEP guidelines right here. And I'm going to go, this is not what it's about now, but everybody keeps talking about a gas station. So if we did not do anything with our current here, they fit the criteria for DEP guidelines by what DEP says. However, by what us creating here, it's not the minimum standard. It might be the minimum standard. Everybody keeps on saying, here's the guidelines for DEP. These guidelines that we are putting in place that we are asking is up here. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we have, not only are we following what DEP says, but we are also adding more things to make sure that we are protecting the springs. So even though DEP can come in there and says, hey, you meet all the criteria, you can do it, we're coming back with a plan that says, no, we're going to add more things to that. Is that correct?
Commissioner Kemp, you're absolutely correct. That does it on the front end, it does it in the middle, and it does it on the back end. That educates you as commissioners, educates the planning department to have a better understanding of what's being proposed, where it's being proposed, how it's being constructed, and how it's going to be monitored and managed throughout the life of the actual project. That goes for petroleum storage facilities, that goes for hazardous materials or hazardous substances, waste, also goes for stormwater. As you guys are aware of, the stormwater regulation is currently in legislative ratification for updating those stormwater regulations to be much greater standards than what they currently are right now. So if everything goes in the manner, July 1 we'll have new stormwater rules. Those will also be embedded in this ordinance. That takes into that fact.
So this is from what I'm reading and off of DEP, because that's all I've done for the past month is read a lot of this. This is twice as strict as what DEP requirements, correct?
But the front end is much more conservative, much more, gives you guys the information needed to make that educated decision. Deeper borings, more borings, it pushes the individual.
We're not trying to do anything that DEP doesn't require. We're actually trying to add more, correct?
You can't. You can't because DEP regulates hazardous waste, hazardous substances.
Not us. No, we're just making it harder to, right.
Correct.
I got it.
Is there anything in this proposal that reduces any standards, any requirements compared to what exists in Wakulla County today?
No, sir.
Absolutely not.
Our intent when Wakulla County, and we had the privilege to work with Wakulla County, that was the message, Chairman, is to build upon what you guys have. How can we protect this specific area, this planning unit inside of Wakulla County to protect Wakulla Springs, to protect the groundwater associated with Wakulla Springs, the aquifers, the caves, the karst, everything that goes along with it, to be more protective of what you have today and what DEP has in place right now.
Would you be comfortable making a comment on how this proposed ordinance compares to our neighbors to the north in Leon County?
I would not be comfortable with that because they are our clients also.
Theirs is skinny.
I can tell you it's a lot more strict than Leon County. Where everything, by the way.
I don't know if Mr. Tom Lewis wants to make that.
Sir, if you will, come to the microphone so the folks at home can hear you. If you don't mind, introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Tom Lewis. I'm the environmental department manager for Terracon, a professional geologist. Lived in Wakulla County the first 10 years of my life on Buckmiller Road. Just a couple observations is, a lot of this, what we're trying to accomplish with strengthening this ordinance is really about requiring site-specific data on the front end. If you already from your preliminary data decide that this is worth pursuing, you're going to require the developer to do a lot of site-specific survey. It doesn't, matter how far it is from a cave system. It's worth pointing out there's a lot of cave systems that aren't mapped out in this area. So this is designed to catch future cave systems as well. So we have a better designed system for actually doing geophysical surveys. And probably the main requirement is, we're going deeper. We're going down to 30 feet.
Versus 15.
Yes, versus 15 feet for where these proposed UST tank pits are going to be. And that's going to be some really good data. You're going to figure out, the density, the type of material, confining layers, and most importantly, if there's voids and caves there. And then At the end of that process, you'll have a report. Everyone can look at that, and if it's pretty clear this is a very vulnerable system, you'll have to kind of come up with a redesigned system. Maybe it doesn't get approved, or maybe they are required to put above ground storage tanks and stuff like that. So that's kind of the intent, was for the entire area to have to go through this process if they're going to put a gas station or some of these other type facilities.
Well, I can agree making the entire area have to go through the process because that's, we're all connected here. My question is at 30 feet, do you know what's beneath it? Because most of these caves are way deeper than that.
Yeah, that's correct, but at 30 feet, you also have a pretty good layer of lithology. So let's keep in mind, too, you'd asked that interesting question about what about a catastrophic failure. That goes into the construction elements of the design. All these tanks, and this was required by DEP going back about 15 years ago. They are designed not to fail. I mean, they have double-walled cases. And now listen, people can laugh at that, but many of your failures of the modern systems aren't from traditional leaking underground. They're not from leaking pipes on the new systems. The old systems were terrible. They were single-walled tanks that had no monitoring on them, no run-through monitoring systems. So these are designed to be monitored, that if something wrong was going there, they immediately will have a shut off, and you have to deal with that system. The biggest risk for them is typically at the modern gas stations you see that have a problem. It's often a dispenser gets run over, or the fueling truck doesn't shut off as it's fueling the tanks. But it's not the actual storage systems themselves based on the design.
But correct me if I'm wrong, if we have a catastrophic failure in any of our gas stations or any of the areas where we have some kind of contaminant, DEP steps in then and takes over as well.
That's correct.
Even when we've had gas spills, like with trucks getting hit, back when I worked at Road Patrol, DEP comes in and takes that over, and they decide what happens with the ground. And
yeah,
I'm not sure that I really think the DEP will protect us, number one. And number two, I'm not sure what the heck you can do if a sinkhole opens up underneath a gas tank and the whole thing collapses into that sinkhole. It's already in the aquifer, and there's no chance they'll do anything to remediate it. So how do you mean that it doesn't, that they're going to take it over? I mean, how do you protect our aquifer from that cave collapsing and drawing the whole gas station down into it?
well, I mean, that's the point of the geophysical surveys.
You can actually tell where a collapse is going to occur.
I mean, you can get some very good data going on that.
You might get some good data.
I would ask you, have you had a gas station collapse here in LA County?
No, but that's not the point.
Or anywhere?
Or anywhere.
But we're kind of getting off point here. We're going into this gas station that's not even on. It's not even on the agenda.
I'm talking about gas.
What I think, and what Commissioner Kent was talking about earlier, what we're doing is adding to the guidelines that we have right now. We're strengthening our guidelines. I understand that there's other people in the county that have opinions, that we need to do all kinds of other stuff, but we're kind of getting off subject here.
I agree.
We're adding to what DEP already has in place to make it stronger, to make more hoops for the developer or whoever that is putting something there. No matter what they're putting there, they're going to have to jump through more hoops to build something there, correct?
That's correct.
Anywhere within the county.
There's the initial review process and the Wakulla Springs detection warnings, and you're going to get some very good data that will suggest that, one way or the other, this is hopefully suitable, but if not, there might be some problems that come from this situation.
Well, I mean, I know that we can't predict where a sinkhole is going to fall in, correct? We can't do that. I mean, that's unrealistic. But I want to make sure we stay on topic here. We're moving around.
Yes.
We're adding to the protection plan that's already in place.
That's correct. We're definitely adding more and better data to make those decisions.
Okay.
But to Commissioner Hess's point, if you do your geotechnical survey and you find that there's a large void on any particular site, Is they going to come back with a recommendation to build over that void and to have a heavy structure built over that void?
I doubt it. I mean, if we get evidence that there's, and there can be some other things besides just the voids that indicate that you're getting close to the voids, or, the density doesn't look right, some of that information, that'll be in that report. You also have to look at the surface, data we get from the geophysical survey. And that's when you come back, and that'll be in the shoes of you, that'll be in your desk to look at, to try to figure out that, hey, this might not be suitable for development of a gas station as they want to have there. This looks like there's a cave under here.
Hey, can you comment on the fact that as proposed, this requirement would now impose that a developer is required to do the geology side, and then we're going to second guess it. We're going to get a second opinion to double check what the developer's opinion stated.
Yes. Yeah.
Which does not exist today.
That's
if a
correct.
developer comes to DEP, the state, and says, we've done our geo work and here's our plan, it's approved by an engineer, then it's generally accepted. But what's proposed, if this passes, is there's going to be a second set of opinion with second experts. I heard tonight they say we need to get experts, and it sounds like to me you are one of those, and you all are. So I appreciate that.
And that's a very good point, because it is good to have a second person's opinion, especially if you're dealing with developers who might be trying to rubber stamp some. You'll get the second set of eyes on there. So.
And you will not have been paid by the developer. We're going to collect a fee, and we're going to make them, but we're going to be your client. We're the one that's going to hire to give that second opinion on that developer's study.
Mr. Chair, may I ask someone the
Please.
process?
Yes.
Should this pass tonight? Would you please tell me the process with regard to when an applicant comes to your office for XYZ? Can we go through that should this pass tonight?
Sure. So currently, under the current ordinance, as long as, if somebody with a hazardous material site comes in for site plan approval, zoning and land use and all of these things are in place, and that zoning allows for that use, then they would be entitled to an approval once they met all of our requirements. If they're in the Springs Protection Zone, essentially they would just have to register with the county that they are going to have these hazardous materials, identify what those are, and then proceed with any DEP requirements for containing those materials on their project site. If this ordinance is approved to move forward to public hearing and is ultimately adopted in its current form, there will be a similar process in place. However, during that site plan review process, they would have to submit all of this geotechnical information and due diligence that's required by this ordinance, and then that would go through a third-party review as it's going through site plan review in our office. As long as the site is suitable for housing these materials, whether it's above ground or below ground, will all be dictated through that process. It's hard to say with 100% certainty without, site-specific data on any given property. This property may be much different than the property next door, lithology-wise. So once that is all determined and all of the other requirements, our site plan review process are complete, then the site would be eligible for approval.
And I have a question too. I thought about earlier too, with talk. So right now, DEEP requires one core sample per 5,000 feet, and ours was going to require 3, correct?
Yes, sir. In this proposed ordinance, if you're going to propose an underground storage facility or contain hazardous materials or waste or substances on site, you're correct. It's 5,000 every 5,000 square feet, 3 borings, 30 feet below where the tank would be. So if you say, we're putting an underground storage tank in, that underground storage tank probably is going to take up, anywhere between maybe 15 and 20 feet below land surface, 30 feet below that. So it's actually 50 feet. You mentioned 15 feet earlier. So every 2,000 square feet above the 5,000 square feet, another boring. What that does is starts generating what Mr. Lewis was talking about, this data that you guys can make these decisions upon of understanding what the geology is underneath this particular proposed facility that would be in front of you. Same thing with stormwater facilities. It's 4 borings per acre. So that's about every 11,000 square feet, and then it goes on from there. Yes, sir.
So, my question is that when you know that there's a cave underneath a parcel, we have 45 miles of mapped caves in the county. If we know that there's a cave underneath that parcel, isn't that a void that you're talking about, and we probably should move off the top of that cave? And that's, that only seems reasonable to me, and I'm trying to figure out why that's not inside the regulations when we have a known cave.
Is that not part of the initial application details? That's correct. What Mr. Lewis is saying, that's part of that due diligence work Commissioner Hess is to discuss that, and part of that due diligence is to go through the Florida Geological Survey maps, go through the Florida Geological Survey information. I'm dabbling in geotechnical world here and probably have to reach out for a lifeline, but that is exactly right. They research what is in that particular site location to get the due diligence, including with the borings, to have a better understanding of what that proposed facility could be in that particular area.
So in those 45 miles of known caves, would you say that we shouldn't be putting gas stations over it?
I don't know how to answer that question, Commissioner Hess, because I don't know if that's...
The way I would answer it maybe is this gives you an opportunity to tell the developer why they can't develop it, right? You have yeah, but you're going to have some data to back that up, and you're going to have, this application process that backs that up.
I understand that when you're dealing with unknown cave systems, but when you have a known cave system, that's not, we don't need the data to tell me that there's a cave down there, because there is a cave down there, we know that. And we can get accuracy of up to a foot where that cave is. So, if I can do that, why wouldn't I require the developer to move off the cave system?
Mr. Chairman, if I may kind of interject and try to answer Commissioner Hess's question. Going back to the June County Commission meeting where we discussed our concerns, staff's concerns about identifying setbacks for cave systems, we acknowledge that they're mapped and, that data is there, but that data is not certifiable in the stance that you've got.
Folks, please fill out a speaker card, and I will ask these folks not to interrupt you when it's your time to speak. Thank you.
That this data is not certifiable from a standpoint where we can actually attach a regulatory standpoint or a setback from that data. Yes, the data is good and it's reliable to some degree within a foot or two, and maybe even better in some cases. But when you start attaching regulatory standards to something that someone is not signing and sealing and putting their livelihood on and their reputation on from a legal standpoint and from a licensing standpoint, then it does have some serious legal consequences for the board. And that's why staff came back to the board in June and suggested that maybe we go a different route by employing some best management practices and look at site-specific conditions. And so that's what we've presented for you this evening, and that's why it does not specifically include a setback from an underground cave system.
And we have, and that is exactly right. We hashed this out in June and was voted 5-0 to move forward with the regulations and the directions that we've got right now. We talked about all that, and today nothing's changed. That data is still not certifiable. We wish it would. Our intent, as I told you, Commissioner, our intent in this whole thing was to have setbacks. That was our intent. But at the end of the day, we can't get there. And that's what we presented to you guys in June. And everybody said, yes, we understand. Nothing has changed since then.
Nothing's changed. And we would love to. Trust me, that is what we want to do. That was our original intent. Mr. Dial was right there with us. We talked to WKPP. Can't get there right now. Now, will it come? Yes. Now, if we were like FDOT and it was our land, we can set back all we want off of it, whatever we want to say. If they said no, we say it's a no cave, we can set back off. Yeah, it's our land. We can do that. But this is somebody else's land. We have to do something legal. All right, we want to set back, and that's the reason we set this in here. We said you have to know known karst features, IEKs, not wellhead protection setbacks like they're in the Hernando County setback. That's to protect the flora and aquifer. It's not a setback for above ground stuff. It's just not that. It's a wellhead protection ordinance. We've got that. Ours is 1,000 foot. It's to protect the flora and aquifer from being penetrated and the cave going into it. So understand, that's what we did. We would love to have it, and that's the reason we told you, Chuck. We said, what about if we put some language in here that said, hey, we'll encourage the developers to have a known system there until that information is certified, and then we can set a setback, and we'd be glad to do it, but we just can't do it. We would love to do it, but we got to do stuff legal. We have to do stuff legal. We can't do this what ifs. It sounds good, it feels good, it does all that stuff. We have to, what is the legal standard?
And if we can get within a foot of where that cave is,
Does that work in a property line? Does that work with a wetland? No, you can't do that. A surveyor can't go out there and certify it. They can't do it.
you can certify where that point is.
No, the surveyor has to know where that whole thing, they have to generate it. That's the whole point.
So just because we can't,
Chuck, you're arguing with state law and federal law. No, I can't argue. That's the law. And our attorney's sitting right here. That's the law. We create a setback. We have to have a certified position, meaning a wetland stake. Wetland stake's put by a professional, then it's certified and it's surveyed. Same thing with stream edge, high mean high water. All those things are set by professionals, recognized, then they're come back behind and they're surveyed in. And we're with you. We want to have setbacks, guys. But you just, and you can say what you want to, you can laugh, but that's what we tried. We wanted to get setbacks.
Well, who's certifying?
Hang on, Pete. You guys be your right?
Okay, well,
I'll ask this question then. Who certifies them?
Who certifies? Certifies what?
What would it take to get a point on the,
That is a question for the professionals at the USGS, not me. That's the reason nowhere in the state of Florida there are cave setbacks. That's why.
Chuck, if you could find those.
Yeah, please do. Somebody can dredge that up.
Yeah. I think there's no disputing the fact that they're getting it very close, and they're using ground penetrating radar, they're getting it very close. But that's the general path. That's not every nook and cranny and creek and fissure.
I'm not looking for every nook and cranny. I'm looking for the big cave.
You have to have, well, what about this? What about if we say, okay, you've got to have a 2,000 foot setback and you've got to move 2,000 feet to the east. Let's say they've got enough land to accommodate that. And what about when they say, well, no one has swam that area. We don't know what's 2,000 feet. There may be a cave that's larger than the one you're trying to tell us to get away from. How do we know that? What's the percentage of the county that has been mapped in the cave system? 45 miles? 45 miles. Of the entire county. So in order to have that, we're going to need to have a footprint of the underground of the entire county, because we can easily say, well, you've got to move this, and we put it over a bigger cave. We put it over the Grand Canyon cave system under there, because no one has swam that. No one's made that connection yet. They might, but they haven't yet.
We're all about, just as soon as this data as WKPP gets up with USGS, and if they can map it and certify it, then we'll come back, we'll be the first people to come back and say, let's do a setback. First people. That was our mission, that's what we wanted to do. We could not get there. We couldn't get there. So I think and so that's where show us that there are experts that can certify it, stamp it, it's going to be acceptable to the state, acceptable to DEP, acceptable to us, that just like a survey of a builder is building in a house, you can't build with a 5-foot setback off the property line if you don't know exactly where the property line is. That's the first requirement. So let's find that expert. If that expert exists, let's revisit that conversation.
Well, why don't we put it in there, and if it's found, if it's certified, then they have to be that far away.
Well, I don't think we can put something in that we don't know that we can point our finger to today. That's just saying, like, if they discover a cure for cancer, we're going to go for that, you know?
Well, if they discover a cure for cancer, we're going to go for
We
it.
are, but we cross that bridge when it's in front of us. Right. I do have a couple of questions. In the proposed ordinance, is there any opportunity, any allowance for anyone to put hazardous material underground?
Under the proposed ordinance,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Thomas? No, sir. It is to be above ground.
So today, if this ordinance was never discussed, could hazardous material go underground today?
Technically, yes.
If this passes, this is going to strengthen that, as Commissioner Kemp was speaking of earlier, that now hazardous material cannot, under any circumstance, they can't come back and say, we've got good geotechnical data that supports putting it underground.
That's correct.
Will DEP allow it to go underground if they have the proper geotechnical?
Yes, sir.
So this is another example where what we're proposing actually strengthens and protects our groundwater further than the state does.
Correct.
There you go. Thank you. Additional questions, comments? We got a lot of speakers.
This is all gas tanks in the streams protection area have to be above ground tanks.
No, that's hazardous.
No.
That's hazardous.
Why are we saying there's more things that are hazardous than gas? So, answer.
There's a distinction between hazardous material and petroleum.
It's a hazardous material.
Not according to EPA and DEP. Okay, so let's take that further. So petroleum, let's talk petroleum instead of hazardous. Is there provision in this ordinance where it can go either above ground or below ground?
Specifically petroleum.
Petroleum only.
Based on the due diligence that we talked about earlier, you do have that option to go above ground or below ground. Both contain, the secondary containment are double wall facilities like we talked about, with the double wall dispensaries, with the alarms, with the compliance wells that are around, that are addressed in this ordinance. Yes, sir.
So still on petroleum, are there examples where due diligence would come back and say, we can support an above ground facility, but not a below ground facility?
That's correct, sir. Yes, sir.
And is there, what about with DEP? Are there times when DEP under current rules would say, under no circumstances can this go above ground or below ground?
I'm sure there's discussions that occur like that with DEP to make that decision based on the due diligence of the applicant of those tanks. That discussion does take place at DEP, but I can't speak on a case by case from DEP. But
would it be easier for a developer to mitigate whatever the topography is on the soil there to put a tank underground than what we're proposing here?
I'm not sure I understood the question.
What I'm getting at is we're putting steps in place that are making the developer go above and beyond what the state requires.
Yes.
Now, it's my understanding that DEP, you do your topography, you do your geotechnical work, and you can mitigate and you could say, okay, we may want it above ground, but you can do it below ground if you do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
Now, are there examples where under our proposal, under the right, maybe there's a void, maybe there's, non-supporting soil, I don't know, I'm not the expert, you guys are, that you would come back and say, we're not going to support a below-ground tank under any kind of mitigation, any kind of circumstances on this particular location where the borings were taken?
Yeah, I would think so, for sure. This is going to be designed to have, deeper and more dense borings that give you the opportunity to decide, A, do we want to take the option of underground storage tanks off the table? And depending upon what you find, maybe it's not even a good candidate for above ground storage tanks. That's definitely an option there. That's what the whole process is about. Well, through the whole footprint of the area too, not just necessarily where these map caves are, but for the entire area, to have to go through that process to truly understand what's at the subsurface 30 feet below where this tank pit's going to be.
So we're studying deeper, we're imposing more standards. To me, that's the main thing that I want the public to understand, that this is not a drill to relax standards. This is not a drill to make things easier. This makes it more costly for the developer. It limits where they can put it, what they can put it, what they have to do to mitigate the risk. And anything I'm saying inaccurate?
No. It gives you the data to look at to deny it too, legally. Defensible data that, hey, based on our study here and based on our review, this is not suitable. We got to do something else.
Very good.
Anywhere.
Yes, please.
I'm sorry, I don't want to bother them anymore, so I'm going to, either they can answer or someone can answer, but with regard to what you provide back to whom? Planning and zoning, and it is a report of suggestions. Is that correct?
Yes, so staff would take the due diligence material and the construction proposal and provide that to whoever we consult with. We hope it'll be Terracon. That is staff's intent to continue to work with Terracon. Should this be approved, to do our third-party reviews of this data. And so we would have them review that data as the experts in the field and make recommendations and explain to staff the findings. There are confining layers, or there is enough overburden on the site to support underground storage between the bottom of the underground tanks to, the aquifer. So we would take that data and that information and go back to the applicants and say, this site does not have any overburden or confining layers that would support underground storage, so revise your plans and go with an above ground storage tank if you're going to move forward with this site and application. So any revisions to that, we would pop back over to the consultants for review, and until everybody is in one general consensus about, whether this is a good plan or not, and whether it meets all of our requirements, the site would not be approved.
Okay, thank you.
I might also add that after we had released this information, the developers over at which affects over at Opportunity Park, NG Wade, they asked a meeting of Summer itself, and one of the first questions, they went through the ordinance and they read it, and they said, well, this is much like what we run into in Alachua County. And they said, we understand it, we're good. But what we tell all of our folks that are building in here or in Alachua County, we just go above ground. We don't even want to mess with the below ground stuff at all. And so, this has a big effect on them. And they said that they're good with it, they understand it, and they're like, we're just going to tell everybody to go above ground to be safe. And just for whatever that's worth, it's not just over on this side of the world.
I've got a question for Heather. I don't want to leave her out. So if this passes and we have this third-party review, and imagine a situation where the initial contractor wants a below ground, and our data and our second opinion says no, this should be an above ground. Can Summer use that as the basis for denial? Where would that put us?
I believe what the ordinance says is if there's not sufficient overburden or a confining layer, then you can require them to go and put in above ground tanks.
Okay.
So under those two conditions.
Very good. Thank you. Additional questions or comments?
Just for the public, this is just to schedule the first of 2 hearings,
That's correct.
and I have to come back to the board twice and to the planning commission once.
No, sir. This would be 2 hearings, one before the Planning Commission and one before the Board of County Commissioners.
So we only will see this one more time.
Correct.
And are there any changes that you've got collected from tonight, or any plans?
I haven't received any head nods from the board with specific directions for modifications, but I'm open to taking that back and making changes if the board has any direction to offer.
I'm definitely for having it, if we find out anything that is actually going to make it better, I'm for it. That's going to help, and I think everybody's for that. So, if we approve it, whether it's not, or the next meeting, is have it as an open living document, and if more data comes in that says, hey, wait a minute, they come to us, or...
That's not what's on.
No, I understand that, I'm just saying...
So let's not get into that. What's here tonight is to approve, to schedule, and
I get that, Chris, I get all that, I'm just saying is...
Yeah, but no, because what's here tonight is to make recommendations to the planning department to change the ordinance as we see fit.
No, what's here tonight is to approve, to schedule, and advertise public hearing to consider adopting the ordinance that is here tonight.
So we couldn't approve this tonight if we wanted. We couldn't approve the proposed ordinance tonight if we wanted to. No, but if we want to have any changes to this ordinance, tonight's the night we do it. Well, we got the last bite at the apple, so I don't know. Well, yeah.
There's always the scenario, and we've seen this with other various ordinances over the years, that we get direction to schedule and advertise, and then when it comes to public hearing, the board could say at that time, no, we want some additional changes to be made, and, the process could start over again. Ideally, staff would love to get any modifications that the board sees fit this evening to go ahead and incorporate that and try to get it as tight as possible before we run through the public hearing process.
So if this wasn't coming back to us, I agree with you. We need to make our mark right now, but it is, and probably more good conversation will come out of the planning commission. And hopefully more research. Maybe somebody will even find a surveyor that's going to go out there and map this thing for us. Well, I just want to have it in there that she's going to recommend the joint site proposal that they move off of the top of caves. It makes sense to me. We can't require it. Okay. I hear that. Okay. But what the experts are telling us that recommendation could very well come about as a result of the data, as a result of the borings, as a result of the research. That's true, but it's just as a general practice. It's just like I just explained. You may make a move off the cave and move on to a bigger cave. And then what happens then?
I think what Commissioner Hess is referring to is not a requirement to move off of a cave based upon the current data that we have, but perhaps an encouragement, which would not be binding, but we could certainly include in the ordinance. Additionally, if the board approves, but additionally, I wanted to point out that under state law, we can always make more restrictive requirements than what DEP has, but Summer has already sent the ordinance several times to DEP for comments, and we will be going through a process to get DEP approval of it as well. Either we have to figure out if it's before or after adoption, because it's not clear in the statute. We'll figure that out.
And we understand, that's what we had talked about, is if we want to add in, encourage and must recognize mapped caves and and make sure, we work with the county to set back off of those or acknowledge those. We can add that language, and that's what we talked about. And
that's what I want to make sure gets added in.
And we can acknowledge that, make sure we acknowledge that, and we can work that up. That's not a problem.
Or if that data comes back that we're talking about.
But we can't.
No, we can't. I understand, but
because that was our initial intent, was to have a setback.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense.
No, I understand.
And it's just, we couldn't get there until we have that information and we're certifiable, and one day it will be available.
But it's just not available now.
Not right now, unless somebody pull it out of the hat.
As with any code and policy, whether it's this or signs or landscaping or subdivision regulations, the board as the legislative body has the authority and the power to come back and amend and change codes as they see fit, as, the circumstances dictate. And, that's one of the exercises we're doing here this evening. We're considering, bringing back an ordinance that is 30 years old, that's updating those provisions. And so if new data becomes available and this data is certifiable to a point where, from a legal perspective, we're comfortable with establishing a setback, the board can always direct staff to come back with more provisions that update this ordinance even further. So that is always an option for the commission to look at any of their ordinances.
And I think that's what we do is if we find something there, we leave it open and we add to the ordinance to make it better. So motion to approve the public hearing.
I second. If I have a motion and a second, thank you, gentlemen. We may call you back up if you don't mind. We're going to go to the public. We'll start out with Ms. Carol Kalinsky. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Carol Kalinsky. I live at 561 River Plantation Road. I'm a lifelong Florida resident, and in my time, I have seen lots of horrible things happen to our state. We've got this little tiny piece of paradise here left, and my interest in this is making sure we preserve it for my grandchildren, my children, and everybody's future grandchildren. So I'm not going to talk about any of the science or technical information that you're going to hear about from a lot of people who have better knowledge than I have. But I do want to point out a couple of things. I want to point out something that has bothered me mainly in social media postings and comments from Wakulla County staff that is inaccurate and misleading. I think that's a real problem. I think that with the county administrator, for example, saying it's impossible to identify the location of karst features or submerged caves or sinkholes, that just is not accurate because DEP uses WKKP's maps. The Florida Department of Transportation used those maps in widening 319. Also, the Northwest Florida Water Management District uses those maps. USGS uses those maps. The Forest Service uses those maps. I mean, why can't Wakulla County use these? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and it's misleading, and it's unfair to do that to the citizens, I think. Also, back in 1999, on the corner of 267 and Wakulla Springs Highway, and I know you all know this, there was a case, DEP filed a petition for eminent domain on a Ken Curtin's property that had the same features, or not the same, but very similar features as many of our parcels in Wakulla County, and specifically the gas station parcel. But in 1999, DEP was able to identify vulnerable features that, since that time, the technology has just become so much better. So in 1999, DEP exercised eminent domain on that parcel because of its environmental sensitivity. It stated that acquisition is necessary to preserve and protect a unique natural resource of unique value to the state of Florida, to Wakulla Springs, and to the Florida aquifer. In the resolution of condemnation, he said, whereas the Wakulla Springs Protection Zone...
Ms. Kalinsky, if you'll bring it into a close, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
The Wakulla Springs Protection Zone project overlies subterranean commons, the direct link with the main spring at Wakulla Springs State Park. The property lies above one of the direct conduits to the main spring. Development of the property would diminish water quality in Wakulla Springs and in the Wakulla River. Just one last thing. The Hernando County ordinance, you all could take that ordinance and cut and paste it. I mean, making it this difficult just isn't accurate.
Thank you, ma'am.
Please.
Thank you, ma'am.
The Hernando County ordinance has a 2,000-foot setback from known karst features and other sensitive areas.
Thank you, ma'am. M. McClure. Thank you, ma'am. Next, Miss Anna Garner.
Thank you. Anna Garner, and I live at 17 Appalachia Way, Crawfordville. I didn't mention, but I've been an attorney for 42 years, licensed in New Mexico. I've done extensive litigation throughout my career, and I want to tell you that statutes and ordinances depend on very clear language. What I heard tonight, I have not seen the ordinance, I wish I had before this meeting, but what I heard tonight was that things defined as hazardous are treated more strictly than those defined as petroleum products. Is that not correct? I understood the geologist to be saying that if it's defined as hazardous, it cannot be buried under the ground. But if it's petroleum, oh, that's a different story. That's not hazardous because it's petroleum. Well, petroleum is quite hazardous, actually. I have personal knowledge of some examples that happened in New Mexico involving petroleum leaks. Leaks are catastrophic. They can be quite catastrophic. My paralegal was involved in litigation in Edgewood, New Mexico, from a buried underground tank that was holding gasoline. That corroded or sprung a leak or something, and all of a sudden everybody's wells were contaminated with, I forgot the name of the chemical, it starts with benzo something or other. Something like that, thank you. And of course it became undrinkable without causing cancer. So it's highly carcinogenic, and it destroyed an entire town's water supply. Edgewood, New Mexico, you can look it up. They had to pay, I can't even tell you how much money it cost for them to have to, quote, clean up and drill new wells so that the Edgewood people had water, drinkable water. For a while, potable water had to be trucked in to them for a very long while. Nobody had drinkable water. So any sort of leak would be catastrophic. But I have a suggestion, and that is because words are very important in laws and ordinances, I would redefine hazardous materials to include petroleum. And that way you would bring it under the stricter standards of the hazardous materials that in the way that they're treated. So if you can, and this is true, I do agree with the county attorney about this, that we can enact stricter ordinances, stricter standards. The EPA is a minimum standard of care, basically, or of standards, acceptable standards, and that the local governments are allowed to require stricter standards, and I think everybody understood that. So what would happen if you redefined hazardous materials to include petroleum products?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Miss Christina Earhart.
I'm Christina Earhart,
Welcome.
486 Parkside Circle. I guess I have a couple of questions. Why do we have to have below ground tanks? I mean, is there a reason for below ground tanks other than just you have to look at them? And I noticed in the ordinance that it says it would prefer not to have below ground tanks, but it's never actually prohibited. And I think that's important for people to understand. I live over the Wakulla Springs, and I would not want what I consider hazardous material, petroleum, to leak into that beautiful aquifer that we also are proud of and we rely on for our drinking water. I think there is a way to get certification of certain areas. I would recommend that you contact DEP, their scientists and their geologists, as well as the USGS, which does have CART interest groups, and have them come and speak, have a workshop, so that we all understand that these regulations are going to affect our water condition for many years to come. And I do think petroleum is a hazardous material. I mean, Vice Chairman, you would not want to drink it, would you? If it came into your groundwater, would you want to drink your gasoline that's in your water? Try not.
It's pretty tough.
So, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Gary Haig.
It's different than bourbon.
My name's Gary Haig. I live at 40 Garner Circle East here in Crawfordville. Of course, I don't need to tell you, how beautiful Wakulla Springs is, and it's one of the largest and deepest springs in the world. So that's why all of this is so important, and you have a lot of passionate people in the room talking to you and trying to come up with a good solution. Tonight I've heard a lot of stuff that maybe I didn't know before, some of it, and but still I feel that when I read through the plan, I feel it's not adequate. I feel that there has to be something that we can put in the wording or the application process or somewhere that says, hey, these are known springs. I mean, there's a known cave system right down here. Don't waste your money buying this property to build a gas station. That sort of thing would inform the public and maybe keep the county commission and the planning team from having to deal with all of this extra work, these third-party people and all that. Maybe people would go elsewhere and not build on those sites. So just, I heard it was possible that they may be able to add something in the language, and I would recommend that the board suggest that they do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. David Damon.
David Damon, Crawfordville. Thank you, commissioners. Show and tell, always. On Capitol Circle Southwest, there's a Texaco station. One day they went to do some surveying at that station, and the surveyor drove a survey stake into the ground. You know what happened? 9,687 gallons of gas leaked from those tanks from the supply line because of this. That's it. That's all it took. This is what we're playing with here. It is absolute insanity to be considering an ordinance that would allow a gas station to be built over a cave that we know is there. I mean, I can't even believe we're having a conversation. And for these guys over there at Terracon, my Lord, catastrophic failure, not a particular concern in this particular area? Where in the world does it get to be a concern then? Seriously. Not over a cave's not a concern? This reads like a blueprint for a gas station over a cave, these regulations. That's what you've done. You're allowing that. You talk about setbacks, you talk about buffers. Talk about buffers. Maybe not setbacks. Talk about buffers. We put buffers, we draw those. The B map is a buffer. Streams protection map is a buffer. Make buffers and do setbacks from buffers. Those don't have to have the pinpoint accuracy that you're talking about for setbacks. If you really did want setbacks, which I know you don't, because then they couldn't build the gas station. DEP keeps getting brought up here. DEP does next to nothing to protect our environment anymore. They have been watered down and gutted. So to use that as the bar that we're doing better than DEP? Come on now. 30-foot borings to find out what's down there? I mean, are y'all hearing this? Really? Are we going to move this forward? You care that little about Wakulla Springs? I'm sorry. But this is just nuts. We have, and not to mention, you can't do the setback's not even in there, and you got rivers. You talk about springs and rivers. You can't find the edge of the river to do a setback? Come on, you're afraid of the term setback. You were afraid of the term cave and conduit in there in the first one, but somebody stuck it in there. This is not going to protect Wakulla Springs. If you care so little about it, be honest and say this is a big money pit for a developer coming from out of state and we're going for it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, Koenig, C.O. Koenig, is that right? Welcome, sir.
My name is Chris Koenig. I've lived in Wakulla County for about 40 years with my family. And one big question I have is why would this company even consider doing such a risky thing? I mean, what's the point? I could understand the Deepwater Horizon issue. You know, there was a lot of oil down in the DeSoto Canyon, a lot, and so they put down this well. All right, and they said no problem with the shutoff because they always were. Well, we know what happened with the Deepwater Horizon disaster. And then they destroyed all of northern Gulf of Mexico. It destroyed fisheries. Billions of dollars had to come out of the BP to pay for the damage that was done. But it was perfectly safe. At the time, Mineral Managements gave it a rubber stamp. Fine, no problem. They're doing fine. Well, it was a disaster. My question is, how in the world does this company even consider doing something that will destroy one of the major wonders of the world, actually, is this spring? Well, why take that risk? Why stick your neck way out and hope that nobody chops your head off? Because that's what's going to happen if a catastrophic event occurs and this cave is flooded with gasoline or some other petroleum product. That's what's going to happen. This is absurd for them to do this. They don't have a big, enormous profit they're going to make from putting this here. It's going to be a bloody dry gas station. This is just insane. I think it's totally crazy. And I would just dismiss it offhand. I really would. That would do them a favor because they wouldn't be standing with their necks stuck out all the time. Why they do that, I don't know. Maybe to make a point. Maybe because they have other issues down the line that they want to do. I don't know. I do not know. But it's about the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Felicia Coleman. Welcome.
Felicia Coleman. I've lived with him for 40 years in Wakulla County. I agree with him totally. I mean, this is really an absurd thought that we know there's a cave. We know these caves are linked up to the Wakulla. They're going to end up, in the sinkhole where, it's just going to, no question about it. Anything that happens there. And I put a gas station there. Aren't there 2 or 3 already on all the other corners on that site? I'm pretty sure there's at least 1 or 2. And the number of gas stations, I don't know that we even need another one. I don't see every gas station pump having people at them all the time, and we drive through there often enough. This just seems like an absurd thing to do that may harm this system that we all care about. I thought you guys might have cared, but I'm not sure anymore. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pete Scalco. Showtime.
It's almost my bedtime, guys. I'm off my game. My antihistamines from the oak pollen are kicking in. And, I want to thank y'all for at least moving forward, and I sincerely believe you're trying to do the right thing. I think everybody needs to pull their horns in and get the groups that we originally talked about getting together and talk about this a little bit, because I think we're this close to having a solution. If we focus on the lack of certifiability, I don't think that's an honest thing. I know from a legal standpoint, you can work around that because there's some things that aren't written in stone, but everybody understands that there's a greater good and a greater public benefit to doing it. It's written in our Constitution. Wakulla Springs, the advertisement law used for this amendment says public interest. There is an overriding public interest to get this resolved. This is a special place. It has to be protected above and beyond the Don't Expect Protection Agency that I worked for 33 years. Because that's what it stands for now, Department of Expedient Politics. Wakulla County can do better, it has done better, and we can do better in the future, is one thing. I like to move us all back. Let's get people together, let's talk about it and come up with a solution, because we can do this. But everybody arguing is not going to get it done. And I have a question. Is the first order of business in the proposed amendment still to eliminate the current amendment?
It is a repeal and replace, so it's not to eliminate it. If we do nothing tonight, if we just say, let's just kill this, these folks don't like it, let's kill it tonight, that stays in place.
Okay, well, Mr. Webster informed me.
Standards than what we're proposing.
Well, Ralph, we've worked together on a number of stuff for years, and I respect your opinion, and I like you. I'm probably one of the few people in this room who can say that.
I like you.
But nevertheless, Webster tells me that amending means to add to, subtract from, or update. Why should we repeal something that has worked well for decades unless there's a legal requirement to do so? Is there a legal requirement to do so?
We are replacing it. We're amending and restating or repealing and replacing.
So you're not amending, you're repealing and replacing.
Yes.
Well, let's be honest. Let's call it the Wakulla County replacement and repealing of the current protections that we have.
Nobody's hiding that. It says it in the title.
Oh, you don't have to hide it. You put it out there in plain sight. You know? Let's just be real. All I'm asking for is, let's be honest. We could do better, and I'm about to shut up. But, you know, let's just get real, is all I'm asking. And thank you for your time.
I'm just glad you still like me. You know what I can get. All right, Mr. Eugene Watkins. He's probably not going to say that.
Yeah, he does. He likes everybody. Even less than the fun septic tank comments.
Eugene Watkins, Crawfordville. First thing, I had some things to say, but I want to talk to you guys more directly real quick. The three of you guys mentioned some things. I think Fred was saying that we're going to make the developer go through more hoops. You were saying that this is going to be double the protection, and Ralph, you were saying that this is going to cost the developer a lot more money. So with this amendment, or whatever you want to call it, are we just trying to make this cost a lot more for the contractor so he can then go ahead and put in the gas station? I mean, those statements you made, I don't think it's what we're here for. I don't think we're worried about how much it's going to cost the developer. What we're here to do is try to protect our springs. We're not worried about how many more hoops he's got to go through. And we're not trying to make him go through hoops just so he can go ahead and build his gas station, or make him pay more money just so he can go ahead and build his gas station. So, and then Ralph, you mentioned a few times about the adjacent property may have a cave system to it. Well, we know the piece that's on right now has a cave system. And I don't know, do you guys have, is this a comp plan change? Do you guys have the power to file just to say we're not going to do this, do a gas station in a spot like this?
This agenda item has nothing to do with the comp plan.
But I guess what I'm saying, we're here trying to claim that we as a county are proactive and we're going to protect. And I'd like to say, if you five know there's a cave system there, you guys have the power to say, no, we're not going to build a gas station here. My other part of it is, let's move it from above the cave, and if they move adjacent, then the requirements you have for boring and those kind of things, maybe they'll find another cave and they'll have to look for another one, but we know there's a cave we're getting ready to build. Another aspect I had in my notes was, I'd like you guys to have some more workshops and invite people like Friends of Wakulla Springs Alliance, and Clean Water Wakulla. These organizations are dedicated to protecting Wakulla Springs
and have valuable information that can be used to write an amendment that truly protects Wakulla Springs and our drinking water. And David, I think you mentioned earlier you had the actual folks from the gas company come into your office. Did you invite any of these other people to come in, or somebody you mentioned?
Putting words in my mouth. No, this was the developers over at Opportunity Park.
Okay, so you had developers come in
that own Opportunity Park, and they made a comment just like anybody else.
So they made a comment, and so other people
They wanted to understand what it was. We explained it to them. Here it is. They said, okay.
Okay, so these other folks could come to see. But anyway, I think we should have a workshop so that we can hear from other professionals.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next, Mr.
And this thing seems to want to fall. I won't charge you guys for fixing it.
We won't charge you for breaking it.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all tonight, and the folks of Wakulla County also. Wakulla's Economic Development Council listened to a presentation recently about this proposed ordinance and the deductive reasoning that went into it and was applied to the study. It was very eye-opening to understand how little Wakulla could legally do to limit damage to our aquifer. But I do think we should get behind our staff and ask you guys to go ahead and move this ordinance forward. I expect that we'll hear a lot about and we're already hearing a lot about it. This is really all about just an end run for another gas station, or that we need large setbacks, and had all this pre-written. I didn't know I was 50 people were going to already talk about it. But, if Leon County, and most of what I'm going to say now has to do with Leon County. Leon County is completely inside the projection zone. The entire county. How many gas stations are up there if we are talking about gas stations? And how many thousands of septic tanks that are probably most of them 20 years old, don't have bottoms in them, are on the south side of the county and dumping nitrogen into the aquifer. And nobody seems to be worried about that too much. So what this ordinance will do, it'll put us on higher ground so that we can begin work, as we're working on Wakulla Springs. It'll open new options to us to help limit damage being done to our aquifer in the springs, while making common sense changes that are legally enforceable in how we permit development. I am a developer, so I'm here supporting it. It will improve our already great efforts to get state funding to get rid of the septic tanks in our old historic subdivisions that were so poorly developed 75 years ago. And this just what the constitutionally mandated funding system that we're accessing is meant for it to be used for. But another thought I had, and this may be tilting it a window a little bit, but maybe we could begin a legislative initiative. We're working with our lobbyists and somehow try to, what I understand, Leon County can access this same fund, the same funds we're getting, but only get them, they have to put a big match to the grant. And so it kind of restricts them doing what we're doing down here. Maybe we could somehow, start some kind of an initiative with Leon County, and if we get on this higher ground with stronger requirements, maybe we could, get with the state and it seems like to me that we're not really trying to. It's not the county's sinkhole; it's the state's sinkhole, and we ought to be trying to come up with some holistic approach that would protect this sinkhole. And South Leon County, I think Chuck would agree, is very much part of the equation here. So just a thought. And finally, if push came to shove, 15, I don't know how many years ago, that we sued Leon County and City of Tallahassee over their sewage treatment plant. Well, isn't this really kind of the same kind of situation? Just a little different, different features here, but it's the same thing. They're dumping stuff in the aquifer, which is ruining Wakulla Springs. So why couldn't we maybe, take that action, and the state may get involved because they're much more cognizant about the flow of water in the springs now. So it's just a couple of thoughts. But anyway, the common denominator, you bring it to a close? Okay, yeah, well, the common denominator for these thoughts and ideas is Leon County. Anything we can do to get Leon County involved in the process will make a difference. So if we're truly here tonight to protect our water, it seems to me that we should all get behind passing this ordinance because it makes everything stronger than it was before. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. I have to talk in here because this isn't about Leon County and what they're doing. This is about what we're doing here in Wakulla County. And while Leon County pollutes our groundwater with their septic tanks, they had about, when the BMAP was written, they had about 7,000 septic tanks in the BMAP, and Wakulla County had about 7,000 tanks in the septic tank. No, that was the numbers in the BMAP, and I didn't write them up. And so that's a shared responsibility, but the gas tanks and what happens at gas tanks is our responsibility and has nothing to do with Leon County.
Okay, so let's go down that road since you brought it up. How many gas tanks does Leon County have in the Wakulla Springs Basin?
I have no idea.
I can tell you how many is in the entire basin. 668 fuel tanks in operation today in the entire Wakulla Springs Basin, including Gaston County, including Leon County. That only includes the portion of the basin that's below the Georgia line. So there's actually more than 668 that's in the basin. So that's important to note because we know that there's dye traces that come from Lake Jackson, Lake Chalkwan, Georgia, that make it to that spring, that basin. You imagine dropping a drop of water in your sink basin in your bathroom, it's going to make it to that drain, or at least feeds that drain, okay? Septic tanks, water wells, so everything goes into that basin. There's 668 tanks that's in there now. So if a single gas station was the boogeyman, we ought to be able to pull up to the upper bridge, throw a siphoning hose over there, and I could just fill up my truck with the fuel that's flowing down that river. But that's not the problem. I mean, that's not the case because there are safeguards that's in place. I think that there is no good place to have a fuel spill anywhere in this county. There's no good place. If we say that this piece of land right here is some holy spot and we can't spill fuel there, you take the most isolated, remote part of this county, it'd be terrible to spill fuel there or any place in this county. We need to be focusing on making sure that every part of the county is as safe as it can be from a spill, not trying to pick one little spot and say this is more holy than the rest of it, because in my opinion, it's simply not.
And I'll disagree with you because I agree with you that every spill needs to be stopped, and I think this ordinance does a great job, okay, of addressing spillage at a gas station. That's not what the issue here is. The question is it safe for our community to build a gas tank over a known cave system? And I don't think it is. So those are two different questions. They're not the question of whether this ordinance effectively protects the aquifer from spillage from at a gas station. That's not an issue to me, because the issue, because that's what it does. The issue to me is it safe to build a gas station over a known cave system? Because if you look at where the sinkholes are inside the whole system, they're usually associated with a cave system. And so, the 2,000-foot setback doesn't make any sense to me, but a 40, basically a 12-12 pitch, okay, from where that tank is going to be to where that cave system is, then that means that, because if you I've been to a lot of sinkholes, and they usually, if they just went through the karst window, they're right into the aquifer, they're pretty straight. They're right visible, okay. But if they're actually a settling sinkhole, okay, which occurs in a lot of places out in the forest, they usually end up at about a 45-degree angle, 12-12 pitch.
Go for
Gopher sink. That's where they end up. And that's the problem, is if a sinkhole like that opens up adjacent to that gas tank, the whole tank could fall into this tank, into the system. And if it breaks, which it would, all the fuel in there would run right into the aquifer because there's nothing to confine it at that point. we agree that we don't want a cave-in that's gonna drop it in, but that could happen anywhere. That could happen anywhere, and most likely happens, if you look at where the sinks are, okay, they're adjacent to the cave system. Most of them are adjacent to the cave system. So we need to move away from that cave system. Make your point. Thank you, sir. Mr. Cal Jameson. Speaking of sinkholes, there's our exit.
I'm Cal Jameson, 411 White Oak Drive, and I'm here to represent the Friends of Wakulla Springs State Park. And just I'm going to read you a statement that we've made, and then I have a couple of comments that I've heard, just that I want to make because of things I've heard tonight. But the friends, thank you for our opportunity to speak here. And although the proposed amendments include enhancements of the regulations and the use of and storage of hazardous substances, hazardous waste, and petroleum products in addressing the potential contamination of Wakulla Springs, we find that the measures outlined are inadequate. You should be aware that the county's policy prohibiting the sale of, I've gotten off my script here a little bit. Anyway, we are not supportive of this proposed ordinance that potentially could further and boost the bringing of pollution-tolerant industries into Wakulla County's special planning area. The Friends oppose any proposed businesses that involves the hazardous use and/or storage of hazardous waste or petroleum products that are being permitted in this extremely vulnerable area. We do not support increasing the probability and the potential risk that could be incurred through the pollutant exposure and the equipment malfunctions and other possibilities that could inflict catastrophic and irreparable harm to Wakulla Springs. We support a well-planned economic development that continues to increase wages, sales, revenues, and visitors in Wakulla County and to Wakulla Springs State Park, but not at the expense of jeopardizing the springs. When I was doing my research and trying to find out things to talk about it, I found that Wakulla County already has, I'm not sure if it's a policy or a rule or an ordinance, but you already have a countywide prohibition for putting hazardous materials anywhere in the county. And that came out of that agreement with the city of Tallahassee when Wakulla County sued Tallahassee. You know that the city of Tallahassee sewage treatment plant cannot sell their fertilizer, their what is we regard as biohazards to anybody, to any farmer in Wakulla County. You cannot buy it, and Wakulla County will not let you put those biosolids anywhere in the county. So you guys have already done a countywide prohibition. You already know how to do this. Another thing is that...
Mr. Jameson, can you bring it into a close?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
You already have cave setbacks in place that the county has required at Heron Trace subdivision on Spring Creek Road. I helped the Appalachian Land Conservancy monitor this property to make sure that there's nothing going on in the setbacks that go directly over the cave system. Using the cave system maps that WKPP provided to you guys, you've already used those. So don't say you can't do it because you've already done it. And the last thing, as I was coming here tonight, I passed by the old Raker store where the Restore is now, and they had probably 8 or 10, I don't know how many underground storage tanks.
There is a company right there, right now, PRMF Filtration, pumping those tanks, pumping samples from those tanks. Those tanks nobody sold gasoline there for 20, 30 years. So think about when you're putting these gas tanks in. Just down the street, half a mile down the street, Michelle's gas tanks. They were there 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago doing the same thing. So, there's...
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Westy Joe DeHaven Smith.
Hello.
Welcome.
My name is Westy Joe DeHaven Smith. I live at 59 Wildwood Drive. I'm a new resident of Crawfordville, and I enjoy your county very, very much. Particularly love Meadow Park. I walk there. Anyway, I'm here today to urge you to consider having further hearings about protection of the Wakulla Springs and all future plans. And thank you for your notice.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to Wakulla. Mr. Bob Clark. You still got about 10.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to at least provide my opinions, and I appreciate Ralph Thomas for at least engaging a little bit this past week. We may not be on the same page, but we're in the same book anyway.
I try.
And I'd like to thank Summer, who's been extremely helpful in kind of going through this process. A lot of this terminology that is kind of new to me. I haven't messed around with ordinances for 25 years, so bear with me. I believe that the setbacks and the buffers were the same thing. That may not be true, but that was my assumption. So my point was, and I'll send you the copies of these things so you've got all the numbers that I'm referring to. But I think it's important to include setbacks or buffer requirements in not just in the comp plan, but or refer to it from the comp plan. Refer to the comp plan in the ordinance. I think it's important to have it in the ordinance. And something like this, just with the tables, would be enough. I mean, it just talks about a first and second magnitude spring, 300 feet, etc. Something that someone really can understand without referencing a million standards, which is what we've been doing. The other thing is, I think there's again, in my opinion, and I think most of you have heard this before, I think there should be penalties in there for non-compliance, whether it's a gas station or a CVS or a whatever. If people are violating the rules, you have the option of, and this is in Florida 125.69, to provide penalties up to $2,000 a day for a gas station, a coffee truck, whatever, who's violating an ordinance. Now, I don't know if you choose not to do that, but I think if you want to ensure compliance, some kind of a penalty or some kind of a cost, if you will, and $10,000 a week should get people's attention. I think it's a good idea. I also think that you should include via reference anyway the 62.761.350 ordinance that contains the specific duties of operators, A operators, qualifications, B operators, C operators, basically what their duties are, what their qualifications need to be, at least by reference. It's already in the state standard, but I mean, if it's referred to, at least you don't have people either ignoring it or go looking for standards. One last point. My son works for the Department of Interior, and he's been there for about 20 years as a geologist. And I've talked to him quite a bit, and he has said that the folks from Terracon are first class, so that was reassuring to me. And we also have one more place, Summer will know, 638, which we talk about a geotechnical assessment that we're doing, according to the ordinance, and the data is supposed to be acquired under the supervision of a professional geologist or a PE, and I still maintain those two are different.
Thank you, sir.
Okay?
Thank you. Miss Christian Swanson? Mr. Christian Swanson. Welcome, sir.
Good evening. My name is Christian Swanson. I live at 30 Evan Road in Carterville. I was here last year when the gas company first came and gave their speech about what they wanted to do, and they brought in people who talked about double tanks and how they didn't leak. But they also came out to that that there's actually leaks all the time, and we're talking spills. How the spills is filling the tank, and then filling the pump, and then filling the pump on the tank on the car, and they can have spills up to 25 gallons a day without having a report. So that means we're talking about a leaky faucet, over our water. And the state allows them to have up to 25 gallons because it happens all the time. So you got to think about that too, about setbacks. So, and how can you have it over it at all when we know that they leak all the time? Putting gas in your car, drop. Where does that drop go? On the ground. It happens to all of us. Every single one in this room was leaked gas at one time or another from the car. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Miss Kathleen Von Haney.
Hi, my name is Kathleen Von Haney, Crawfordville. I'm here in my individual capacity as a private citizen. So, this is the map that was at rivers beneath us. I hope the Terracon folks are paying close attention to this. These are the DEP contaminated facilities from the DEP Public Records Interactive Map with Oculus documents within the Woodville-Karst Plain. Part of the problem with this ordinance is it doesn't really address the unique features of the Woodville-Karst Plain, what is susceptible to contaminant transport within this unique karst environment, and it doesn't adhere to the Wakulla County Aquifer Vulnerability Assessment. Next slide. And you also received booklets of the deep plumes from petroleum contaminated within the Woodville-Karst Plain, and you also received a series of other plumes of petroleum contaminated plumes in the Wakulla area. So you've got the engineering reports that came in. The first one is the one that we all know is under the Wakulla Old Sheriff's Office, and the plume map, as we know, it looks like this. Everybody's seen it. If Terracon hasn't seen it, then they probably weren't given any of the documents from November 7th, 2022. If you go on, keep scrolling through, you're going to see that the next page deals with the plume. That's the black and white. Go to the next one, and I'll be happy to walk the property with anybody after the fact. We also have, go on to the next page, please. This is a geological cross-section that shows that this plume is down at 105 feet. It's within imminent risk of contamination of Sopchapi well number 5, which is the drinking water for over 10,400 households in Wakulla. Next. Then you have the Texaco station. David Damon already talked about how it came, had nothing to do with the text. Next. The tank, it didn't happen. This is benzene. 125 feet below land surface within the Woodville-Karst Plain. Again, it's a large plume. Next, it went through all kinds of geology, a much higher level of geology. That's why your ordinance is flawed. You don't define overburden. You don't define confining layer. You use a term which doesn't even exist in geology or karst science. I'm surprised nobody picked that up. So I have some documents that will give you more technical comments. I'm not going to address every single thing. Your contract with Terracon asks them to be present on board meetings or workshops. The memo from Summer and David Edwards gave you 3 options. They recommended option 3, which was board direction. It was not moving it forward for a public hearing. You need to have workshops to workshop this issue, and let's make sure you got the karst scientists in the room. And if you need anybody from the Karst Interest Group, from the U.S. Geological Survey, I know 3 of them, okay? I've been in contact with them. That map that Chris Warner put up, that was published in the American Cave Conservation Association Spring 2023 newsletter that has been all over the country and also internationally. So everybody is watching Wakulla County and saying, what are these people going to do with this 45 miles of a mapped cave system. You need to protect it. You need to have more workshops. We need to have a dialogue where we private citizens can make sure that we are communicating with the scientists. You invite DEP, FGS, you invite USGS Karst interest groups, you invite National Cave and Karst Research Institute, which I know Terracon knows that entity very well. And let's have a frank, open discussion. Thank you very much, and I'm going to give you a variety of gas station discharges and some other materials. And like I said, I'll be happy to walk the property to show the plume to the Terracon folks, as well as making sure they get another set of booklets if they haven't received all these booklets before. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't have to walk. No, that's right. Yeah. Mr. Michael Keys, come on down.
Good evening. Michael Keys, 58 Razorback Road. Some of you watched me raise my 2 kids here in Wakulla County, and both of them were lifeguards at our fabulous Wakulla Springs. I've got 2 key points, and I've got to say, Ralph, you surprised me. You preempted one of my points, which was, the first point is, I'm surprised we haven't really talked about this yet. You talked about expanding the area protected. Well, this ordinance only applies to the original 2008 Springs Protection Zone, which I have on the map there in purple. All of Crawfordville and where I live and the southern part of the county is not even contemplated in this ordinance. So an ordinance designed to permanently protect the aquifer should apply to all areas where the aquifer is vulnerable. This proposed ordinance would protect less than half of the Wakulla Spring Shed. And my second key point, and we'll get back to this, is table this for now. You guys have done some really good work, but table it for now. Set up public workshops, and we can improve this plan with better input from the community. And we owe it to our grandchildren to get this right. So I am here on behalf of the Wakulla Springs Alliance as vice chairman and a member of the board. And the Alliance finds that this proposed ordinance fails to adequately protect and serve the citizens of Wakulla County, Wakulla Springs, and the Florida aquifer. As defined, the regulatory boundary, in purple, is the 2008 Wakulla Springs Special Planning Area, which excludes 54% of the land within the basin that is vulnerable to aquifer contamination. I know we got a couple ex-law enforcement folks here kind of do a thought experiment with me. If y'all only ever pulled over female traffic violators, that's about 46% of the population. About 46% of the Springs area is being protected by this ordinance. 54%, the male population, you wouldn't be pulling them over apparently. 54%, the area surrounded by the blue in the basin management area, is not even contemplated as being protected by this ordinance. What would that look like if you didn't pull over the male drivers that were doing something crazy on the roads? So the proposed ordinance would only apply to 38,000 acres of the county that's actually, that we know from the ordinance, or from the study that you guys helped pay for back in 2009, that's vulnerable to aquifer contamination, all the warm colors up there, leaving 44,000 acres within the BMAP boundary under constant threat. That's the warm colors to the south, still within the blue zone, which is the BMAP boundary. I provided this map for you so that you can see that visually. It's a little easier than me just describing it. We urge you to conduct public workshops, as you've heard already, with a panel of independent subject matter experts who can help rewrite this ordinance to better address real-world threats. Your family drinks the water here, so does mine, and that's, you've heard enough, but I really want to bring home that point. Mr. Kemp also talked about this. If there's anything we can do to strengthen this, you're on the right path. Why not include the rest of the area within the watershed that is vulnerable to, we've already determined it's vulnerable through the Springs Vulnerability Assessment. It's just sitting there, including Crawfordville. So I'm real confused by that. Hopefully that can be addressed. Thank you so much.
Keys, may I ask you a question before you leave? Did you say that you're the vice chair of the Wakulla Springs Alliance?
That's correct.
Is there a fuel tank on site at Wakulla Springs?
Yes, we are. There is. We are the Wakulla Springs Alliance, which is different than the Friends of Wakulla Springs, so we're not specifically tied to the state park.
Okay. Do you have any idea how close that fuel tank is to the actual vent itself? Is it more than 2,000 feet away from the vent?
It's fairly close, but none of what I addressed had anything to do with setbacks.
No, I'm just asking because you identified yourself as a person that's involved with the Alliance. And so I'm just hoping that you can clarify this.
Not sure what that has to do with what I presented there.
Well, the point is there's never a good place for a fuel spill. I think we know that. And, I've heard it said that we need to do everything we can to make sure that it doesn't happen. There's a 500-gallon fuel tank right next to the lodge that's probably less than 100 feet from the vent right now. Every boat that runs up and down that river has a fuel tank on board, and I've never in my entire life seen an outboard engine that didn't leave a blue trail of fuel residue behind it. My point is we've got to find a way to coexist with everything that there's. We want to protect it, but I didn't see any horses or any bicycles tied up out front. We all came there, most of us, in fuel-burning vehicles. It's a part of life, and we need to make sure that we've got safeguards in place to protect the point of contamination. I was just hoping that you can confirm that what I confirmed is accurate, that there's a 500-gallon fuel tank there, and obviously I've never heard of a spill coming out of that tank. So there must be some provision, some steps that can be taken to minimize the chance of spill. That's what I hope we can find countywide.
I do agree, but again, my point was that you're ignoring a pretty large area of the county. The Springs Protection Zone does actually include DEP storage tanks at Wakulla Springs, but what about all the stuff to the south? I don't quite understand how that got missed in this.
You see right there? I said no good site for a fuel spill. I wrote that an hour ago.
We agree on that one.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Robert Dial. Before you start the clock, I'd just like to observe that next time I come to talk to you all, I'm going to come late because apparently you put the early folks on the bottom of the pile. Oh, no, sir. I took them not intentionally, I'm sure, but I took them the order they were handed to me. I wasn't pointing my finger at anybody in particular, just making an observation. Thank you, sir. My name's Bob Dial. I reside at 2409 Oakdale Street in Tallahassee. I'm a member of the Wakulla Springs Alliance Board of Directors and speaking on their behalf this evening. As your consultants have shown you, this ordinance has got robust site assessment requirements, but it offers no new protection of the Florida aquifer from leaks or spills of gasoline or other petroleum products. Section 5A is the crux of the protective policies that are in the ordinance, and as we've been hearing, it prohibits the storage of federally listed hazardous substances or hazardous waste in underground storage tanks, and it requires that they be stored in above-ground tanks. So that's what's in the ordinance now. That section provides no enforceable protection against contamination from gasoline and other petroleum products, which are not defined in the ordinance as hazardous substances or hazardous wastes. Those harmful pollutants can be stored in underground tanks if there is any overburden or confining layer between the tank and the limestone bedrock. The ordinance does not define what comprises overburden. It does not define what comprises a confining layer. It does not specify minimum area extent or the minimum depth of either of those features. So you can have all this data and you have a rule that doesn't speak to the data. You won't know whether you got too much or too little of what you need. The Texaco site that's been mentioned a couple of times here this evening, as Kathleen pointed out, DEP documented gasoline contamination at a depth of 125 feet from 4 gasoline constituents that are in fact federally listed hazardous substances: benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, and xylene, despite the presence of 85 feet of overburden, including 2 layers of clay that might be characterized as confining layers. One of those layers is 5 to 12 feet thick, and the other is 20 to 38 feet thick.
no amount of sand overburden, which is pretty much what we've got here in Wakulla County, is going to prevent groundwater contamination from gasoline or petroleum products. It's going to find its way through the sand. The DEP site assessment shows that clay sediment layers thicker than what we've got here in Wakulla County did not preclude gasoline from penetrating 125 feet below the surface. Final point, the Alliance therefore calls upon you to amend the draft replacement ordinance to treat gasoline and other petroleum products in the same manner as hazardous substances and hazardous waste as are currently defined in the ordinance, and prohibit the underground storage of them anywhere within the Wakulla Springs Special Planning Area. That's our recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next, Ms. Sandy Cook. Welcome.
Sandy Cook, 2888 Spring Creek Highway. So for 37 years I was with the Park Service. The last 16 I was the park manager at Wakulla Springs. And during my 16-year career there, for the most part, the Board of County Commissioners, like you guys, supported Wakulla Springs, realized it's a jewel for the county, and supported adopting ordinances or whatever to protect Wakulla Springs. And there were many a controversial moment during those 16 years. And in fact, I'm having kind of flashbacks, 30-year flashbacks here, when this ordinance was passed, because this room was the same size, but a lot more people in it. And so when that ordinance was passed, I was pretty heavily involved with it. Attended many meetings here. I don't miss that, part of a retirement. But I would like to say that original ordinance, that map, was based on cave system. And there was a lot we didn't know back then, but I have a picture of that map that we toted around for all the workshops and meetings and everything, and it was based on what we knew then. So, and ironically, that ordinance was a result of a proposed gas station. Some things just come back around. And it's what kind of led to the Friends of Wakulla Springs being developed. And I will say that after the county commission passed that ordinance, there was news articles all around the state, applauding the county commission for doing that. So the ordinance has served us well. Maybe it's time to tweak it, but I think we can see that there has been a lot of good work since that ordinance was passed. Somebody mentioned the City of Tallahassee, Wakulla County Board of County Commissioners joining in that lawsuit, which really put Tallahassee on notice that they got to do the right thing. And then in 2003, the Board of County Commission passed a resolution supporting the DEP's amendment to the Florida Administrative Code that strengthened some of the springs protection. And then in 2006, Board of County Commission adopted some stronger standards for springs protection. And I read a quote where the Secretary for the Department of Community Affairs said, Wakulla County became the first Florida county to adopt tough springs protection standards. It's by far the strongest yet adopted by any Florida government. So we've worked great together in the past, and hopefully we can continue to do that. Since I retired, I've enjoyed my retirement. Haven't been into many county commission meetings, don't miss them. But this one kind of struck my heart. I was here when this was passed. I agree with my fellow former park manager. I think we're real close. I think if we all sit down together, I think the USGS could probably help us. I think we can really come up with a strong ordinance, and maybe again, Wakulla County will be put on the map as leading the charge. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out of retirement for us. Next, Carrie Livingston. Welcome.
My name's Carrie Livingston. I'm one of the youth of this county. I just graduated from Wakulla High School in 2022. I would just like to point out a couple facts, like she was talking about with the burns in New Mexico. That's called the underground fires, and they still are burning to this day. They still have not been able to put them out. And that's what we're kind of looking at if we do this. Like if this passes, that's a very good possibility that that will happen to us. And I know for my sake, I have grown up here and I have lived over the Wakulla Springs water basin for how many years now? About 12 years now. I've drank out of the well for about 12 years now. I'm perfectly fine so far. But I know that if we pass this and if we continue to live there, it won't end well. I have all ideas that it will not end well in anybody's safety for the future of this county, anybody's health, or anything of that matter. And I do know that also with petroleum spills, they have been detrimental in the past several years, and that's in all of history. But that's pretty much it.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for coming up. Last on the list, Mr. John Parks. Come on down. Welcome.
Appreciate it. Let me speak.
Yes, sir.
John Parks. I'm at 279 Oakwood Trail, Crawfordville. I was listening to the conversation on the ordinance, and I just need a little clarification on something. I know there's supposed to be a technical report, Souls report, and it's going to be reviewed by a third party. So my question is, if the third party review of the report states that the site is unfavorable for development, and that's what the recommendation is not to allow the development to occur, is that a binding recommendation, or can the commission overrule that and approve it anyway?
Well, I think I kind of asked a version of that question. Can we use a dissenting opinion from the third-party review as the basis for denial? And the county attorney says yes, that could be the basis of denial.
It could be.
Yep.
Could be a
Are you talking about for an underground storage tank? I mean, what the ordinance says if there is, I guess, not sufficient overburden or a confining layer, then they have to go above ground. They can't do an underground. And additionally, it says that hazardous substances and hazardous waste, which defers to the EPA definitions of those terms, cannot go underground.
That's correct.
Right.
But the report's recommendation would not prevent the commission from approving it if they so desired. Is that correct?
Well, that's not something that we approve. That's another misconception that's out there. We don't approve gas stations, believe it or not, after all this talk tonight. We approve comp plan changes, we approve rezonings, but we don't approve gas stations. So that would be done at a site plan approval stage by the planning department.
Okay, all right, that answers that. So another comment I had is I'm a civil engineer, licensed engineer with the state, and we do, I've designed a few pipelines, and the pipelines, some of them are constructed with directional bore. It's called horizontal directional bore. And it has a transmitting device on the end of the drilling bit, and there's somebody up above who can actually determine where that drilling bit is. And those marks are set, and after the pipe is in the ground, we have a surveyor come out there and actually survey and identify, and mark where where the pipeline is, so we know where the pipeline is. The municipality owns the pipeline, they put it on their maps, so we don't go that deep, we go maybe 30, 40 feet. So I don't know why the same doesn't apply with the cave system. It seems like the same type of technology could be certified, so you may want to look into that a little more.
Thank you, sir.
The only question I got here, and I won't beat a dead horse. Did I miss something, and tell me if I did, between the old and the new? Did we miss something where we changed, we made it stronger and better? We didn't take anything out though, correct me? Right?
That's my...
Is that right?
But there are some exemptions to the provisions of the ordinance that are included currently in the 94 version that's on the books. Those exemptions have been removed from the proposed draft.
So when you say remove, that's a tightening of the regulation, not
That
a
is
loosening
correct.
of the
The
regulation?
tightening of that that's correct.
But not make it weaker, not make it go any less than what we're,
That's correct.
all right.
That's my understanding.
I know somebody says the old ordinance is fine. I just want to make sure that we're making this stronger, not keeping the same. Obviously, when Ms. Cook was talking about ordinance, a lot of things have changed during the time, and I don't know if that mapping system was done back then or not. I'm not sure on that part off the top of my head, but, again, I'm not going to keep going on to it for the public hearing, but I want to make sure that obviously anything we could do to make it better, I want it to make it better. And I think that's what we've done here. That's the reason we've hired a company with an impeccable reputation. I think everybody agrees with that on there to make this better. If we didn't have this here, and if it does, say if we say scratch it all here, and all of a sudden DP can come up here and it can do its own change, and they can do it without our regulations, and it would be worse. So I think what we're doing is making it better. Unless I'm missing something, and God, I thought between this and septic tanks and stuff like this, I think I've read more on that than anything. But I appreciate very much everybody's input on this, because I do have a few questions I want to ask y'all after this too. So.
Well, and we had some recommendations to improve some definitions, and I think that's probably reasonable. Overburden and defining layer and
My question was the one that Mr. Keys had sent me before I got here is why I thought with this here, all of it would be covered into the Wakulla Springs BMAP, correct? Not just percentage.
This would apply to everything that's in the current Springs Protection Zone. We are not proposing an increase or a change in the boundaries. That was not the directive given by the board. The protection zone was expanded in 2008, again, based on vulnerability studies and cave diving and mapping and all of the available data that was in place in 2008. So this ordinance would only apply to all of the special planning area as it's currently identified, not the entire BMAP area.
So we could expand this to cover all the priority focus area in the BMAP.
That would be another directive that the board could provide if they choose to expand the boundaries. But that was not part of the previous directive, so therefore it's not proposed in the ordinance currently.
Yeah, but it could be added.
If the board chooses to do this, so sure.
I would vote for it.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem extending the boundary on it. I mean, to from what Mr. Keys has showed. So is it that much problem?
So would we have to make a vote on it right now?
You all could provide us direction to bring back that with the future draft of this ordinance or to a future public hearing. We'll be happy to prepare an exhibit that would show that. And I don't know if Jessica, if you can still pull that up and just get take a look at the difference between the exhibit that Mr. Keys provided.
I got it on my phone that Mr. Keys.
We can also amend in the future, and you come back and say, hey, let's do that, because that's a whole nother set of public hearings, and all of that stuff it's something that, you're right, it needs to be done, but there's a whole nother set of research and stuff like that, and we need to have these regulations in check just in case something does come in. And I would me
personally, I would definitely like to add it to, in there.
Well, I mean, you're just extending it out.
Extend it out to further.
Right.
So and something to keep in mind is if the boundaries of the Springs Protection Area change, that does change the comp plan map. So that would have to be an amendment to the future land use map, because that boundary is embedded in that area. And then all of your policies that are existing that are specific to the Wakulla Springs Special Planning Area that are in your comp plan would also be applicable to that zone as well. So I just wanted to make sure that was brought to your attention.
So it sounds like what you just described is if we were replacing the Wakulla Springs Protection Area with the BMAP, and I don't know that that's what he's proposing. I think he's saying on this ordinance, to adopt the BMAP area and not.
Right.
Yeah, just.
To adopt a separate boundary, yes, so
Yeah,
we
separate
would
boundary, I
need
got you.
to have.
Yeah, not the whole thing, just in the BMAP area to adopt that into the ordinance.
So you would be creating an additional special planning area separate from the current Wakulla Springs special planning area. So you would essentially be creating another jurisdictional boundary that would have a different set of rules in place for this boundary, and then in this boundary, we do something different.
Inside the boundaries would be not the BMAP.
I hear you, that's going to have some ripple effect, there's going to be some unintended consequences that we're not thinking about here on White. There's a lot of.
So what I would probably recommend is, for simplicity's sake, is leaving the Springs Protection Boundary as it is currently, determine what you're going to do with the proposed ordinance, adopt it, throw it out the window, modify it, adopt it, what have you. And then if the board wants to look at making new boundaries with different regulations or amending the existing Springs Protection Boundary to include a greater area, a lesser area, move it to the east, to the west, what have you, then look at that under a separate
We just
act.
put that on the agenda to talk about on the next, is that what we do?
If you'd like to have a separate agenda item and come back and talk about that, it probably won't be ready at the next meeting, quite honestly. It may take a little bit of time, but we would have to do that, and then we can.
We just got to make sure we can unwind everything.
No, I don't want to unwind everything. I don't want to do that.
No, what I'm saying is there's a lot involved in making those maneuvers, so.
Well, I definitely want to talk more about open the boundaries for the difference.
Right. So that makes sense.
Can we put it on the agenda for sometime in the near future?
We'll try to get it on the 1st June. Yeah,
Okay.
if possible.
Yeah, that's probably.
She's got more stuff to do, so.
I know you got a lot coming up. Would that be a good time?
Let us look into it and we'll get it on the agenda just.
Yeah, let's.
Okay.
It would be preferable for staff sanity to handle one thing at a time and bite one piece of the apple off.
We got it. Look at it.
There's a lot of other projects on my desk.
And there have been a lot of suggestions tonight to have a workshop to discuss this with, more, so that citizen professionals can interact with the paid professionals to discuss what they've done and and let them explain in that format what's going on. Could we schedule a workshop to let that happen, and so we can see the citizens scientists and, they're scientists, but they're citizens, they're just citizens of the county, the paid professionals, their differences in how they see this activity.
Mr. Chairman, I ask another question. So tonight, on the agenda is the repeal and replacement of the Springs Protection map, correct?
It would not repeal and replace the map. The proposed ordinance also has the same map that's currently in place for the 2008 approval. Those boundaries would stay the exact same.
And that is why
it's proposed.
That map was used, because another map would be a different ordinance completely.
Correct.
There is no blanket ordinance for maps. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
There's a lot.
Even though it would make sense to have that.
I thought that we could have originally, until what she said, that we could have just extended out, but I get the.
Yeah, it's just baby steps.
So, let's get this in place, because I know everybody's worried about the gas station. Who said they don't put this on the agenda 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks now, or a month from now where it comes up? So I want to at least have something in place, for it. So, but I do want to take a look at extending it. And I want to talk about everything together, and I'd like to talk with them also some more about this. So, that's it.
So would you support a workshop on this?
I want to talk with them first, and then we can decide on the workshop. They're the experts. They're who we hired.
I know, but there's also a lot of other people that are.
Because I still have a lot of questions right now, but I know I'm going to beat a dead horse because that's not what we're.
No, you're not. That's what we're here for.
So I just have a few more questions that have been brought up, and I want to ask them.
Well, you kind of alluded to something. I want to specify that if we impose this, we adopt this, we're imposing new regulations.
Right, and we can always add to it as we go.
If a gas station, that gas station, or any other gas station makes application with her tomorrow, then that's prior to us adopting any of this stuff. So the further we kick this down the road,
the worse it's going to get.
The less chance we're going to have these regulations, extra regulations in place.
I agree with that, and that's why I said I like to go ahead and do with that. And then if we want to add some stuff, which, in my head, until I can get all my facts and read more, I don't want to put my foot in my mouth right this minute and be wrong. So I want to look and read some more and get some more information. But I'm for keeping it as a living document and adding more as the information that comes to do whatever we can do to make it better for our springs and for our drinking water, not just for us, for generations down the road. I agree. I think everybody on this board agrees with that. And that's what we all want. But, again, until I have facts in front of me from not knocking Ms. Cook, or I'm just using you, Ms. Cook, because you're right here. I want to hear from experts, nothing against Mr. David Damon. I want to hear from experts that does this, like these gentlemen here, and, people that does this for a living, and even Miss Catherine Vanor. I read all of her stuff. Don't understand half of it, but I read it. So I do want to get all the facts together to make a decision, but I want to go ahead and go on with the public hearing for sure to get it in place. And then we can always add.
We always get the feeling that everything is final, but
it's not final.
You can see in government, there is nothing that's final. Yeah. Everything is constantly up for reason.
The main thing I want to stress, because of everything that gets put out, this is not lesser, this is more. This is more restricted than is currently by DEP, and I get tired of hearing people say, hey, we're trying to take, no, we're not. We're trying to make this better protect. So I want to make sure that the public hears that. This is way better than what we got. This is more stricter than what DEP requires. And that's been proven by the people that we hired for this. Absolutely.
Additional questions?
I have a question for you, if I may, and I've never done this before, but can I ask Michael Keys a question? Sure. You gotta come.
As long as he's willing.
Exactly. The Wakulla Springs Alliance is different from the Friends of Wakulla Springs, because the Wakulla Springs Alliance is an organization that can lobby government agencies to enhance the protection of quality and quantity of the water flowing to the spring. And let me just ask you this. The reason I want to know this is because it's very confusing when we look like we're all on a different page, because I believe that we are all on the same page. So you guys can lobby governments, and I don't mean lobby as in, I mean, you can tell us what you think, but the Friends of Wakulla Springs performs good deeds for the park, and they are controlled by the Department of Environmental Protection. So they are not permitted to lobby for state protection. They conduct fundraisers for park maintenance and numerous volunteer projects such as roadside cleanups, monitoring, and education, etc. So I want, and if you can't answer this, it's fine. Can you tell me the connection between a state-owned asset, Wakulla Springs, the fundraising arm, the Friends of Wakulla Springs, and the Wakulla Springs Alliance, and why in your magic 8-ball there is such a division with regard to everyone working separately instead of together for an entity that the state owns and therefore regulates? Do you have an answer for that?
I think so.
Okay.
And you're correct that lobbying, in the sense you're using it, isn't.
I'm saying just like we did tonight. Not, yes.
Not the same as
I don't mean anybody's registered. I've already looked all that up.
Right.
I understand the DEP is the lobbyist for Wakulla Springs.
Yeah, it's just a different but overlapping missions is what I would say.
Okay.
And the Friends of Wakulla Springs State Park, just like many other Friends organizations of other state parks, their mission is very specific to that geographic area of the state park and that very mission. And the Wakulla Springs Alliance is a number of folks from around the community, and our mission is for the entire watershed of Wakulla Springs. There's no other entity, no other non-governmental, non-profit entity that is interested in the preservation and the protection of the entire watershed, or that may not be exactly right to say that there's no other such entity, but that's our mission. There is, say, like the Florida Springs Council, an umbrella organization trying to protect all Florida Springs. We work with them as an example, but our mission is specific to the watershed. We'll call Friends, we'll call Springs, specific to the park. So just a smaller geographic footprint. And obviously different in that we are not underneath DEP or any other government entity.
Right. Okay, so you do work with DEP? No, you don't?
No, we're just incorporated as a nonprofit.
That's what I wanted to know. Okay, thank you. Ready to vote?
I'm ready to go. Any more questions, comments, discussion? We have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
I think she wanted to clarify the ordinance.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify if there was any consensus as to specific direction that the board wants to provide as far as the text of this proposed ordinance. There were a couple of things that had been kind of tossed around at the dais, but I didn't get a good warm fuzzy feeling from any board, from the majority of the board that they want me to incorporate specific language before bringing it back for public hearing.
I think the definitions for sure. If there's something in there that a layman is not going to understand, I certainly don't understand a lot of that. Let's define it. And if it's further defined by state or federal, then at least refer to that.
Well, I think we also, as Commissioner Hess has said, is work in the
encouragement.
Yes, and work with the county or develop, however we word that. We need to word that in.
And that would encourage developers to site facilities away from mapped underground cave systems. Not a hard and fast setback, but an encouragement to push away as far as possible.
That would be my, it needs to be in there. I don't think it's too weak, but what needs to be there.
Would y'all be willing for, I talked to Heather about the possibility, what it is about doing, like Mr. Dial said, having it where all tanks in that area are above ground. And I think there's a definition issues with EPA with that we were talking about. Is that possible to consider that, have the board at some point consider that?
We have to look at whether there's any sort of preemption, but I think we're mixing up two concepts right now. The ordinance currently says that hazardous substances and hazardous waste cannot be stored in underground tanks. Those are federal terms, and that they're in the existing ordinance, and we didn't change them here. Only petroleum is what is potentially allowed in an underground tank if it meets the requirements of the new ordinance.
But we can't redefine our ordinance to include petroleum as a hazardous waste.
Well, I mean, I'd have to look at federal law to see if there is some sort of preemption there. Right now, petroleum is not included as a hazardous waste. We've included it, though, in this ordinance as a regulated substance. So it's already regulated. It's just regulated slightly different than true hazardous waste or a hazardous substance.
Yeah, but if it was hazardous waste, they have to put them above ground.
By our ordinance.
Well, I think where we're going with this is, what I'm trying to say is, yeah, that's hazardous waste, and you're right, that has to go above ground. What I'm saying is I think that y'all can say, hey, let's put everything above ground with storage in this area, and you should be able to do that.
I don't know if you can.
But I think that's something that we need to look at and get back to you.
Yeah, would you look at that and bring it back to us?
We'll look at it and get back to you.
And it seems like it kind of sidesteps the geology, whether or not the geology supports that.
You still need to do your geology, but it makes it a lot less, that's better, right? More better?
Why would you do the geology if you're just going to put it all up?
Well, you still need to do your geology.
I'm doing it.
Yes, sir.
If you will, come to the microphone. There are folks tuned in intently at home, I'm sure, almost 3 hours in. No one has left us, I'm sure.
With petroleum products, there's believe it or not, it's a large part of the reason they're underground is because of the risk of explosions and accidents. So that's something to consider too. That's behind a lot of the reasons. It's not just a safe space for the parking lot, it's to actually provide some safety to the community. Point that out.
Thank you. For a little isolation.
Well, I'm to keep people from all the stuff.
Vandalizing them. Yep. But we recognize that it's considered hazardous. Yeah. Salt water can be hazardous. Fall off a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean and see how hazardous that is.
Definitely hazardous.
Very quick.
All right, y'all note.
Is that from the water or the fall?
Motion stands for second.
What is the motion, Commissioner King?
Motion to extend for the public hearing.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. Passes 4-1. Thank you guys all for hanging in for that one. That was a good one.
Now let's move on to something controversial.
General business, item number 10.
Hold on, let me find it. Good to see you, Bob.
Kenzie gonna present this?
Kenzie's going to present this, and that's the reason I said something more controversial than that.
I know everybody's super excited about golf course logos, so let's get rocking and rolling. This agenda item requests board select and approve a new name and logo for Wakulla County's golf course. We purchased the golf course in 2021, and when we purchased it, we did exclude the name Wildwood Country Club from the purchase. So we really want to make this a new and unique name to generate awareness of the facility's new ownership and revitalization. So the county administrator and myself have pulled together a list of names and proposed logos for you guys to select from. First being the club at Wakulla, the second being Wakulla Sands Golf Course, and the third being Swirl Sink Golf Club.
Motion to approve Swirl Sink Golf Club.
I like the clubs at Wakulla.
Oh, see, we gotta get a second to go anywhere.
I like the Sands.
Well, this can be a long night, so what's gonna happen?
Plays golf. So I was gonna let Chuck decide, and I'm gonna second what he wants.
What you like?
Wow! Chuck's gonna, okay.
I like the swirl.
Well, then you're gonna second my motion.
Second motion.
All right. Go ahead.
And the reason is that I don't care how many times you play it, you don't know that that's there. Okay, the swirl.
Right, so what's wrong with that?
Because nobody knows it's there.
I didn't even, okay, so now tell me what it is, because I didn't even want to swirl.
Better than the
on the back side of the.
It has a swirl, it has an actual swirl.
Middle Institute and goes.
I got you, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna let Chuck, and I was gonna say, because I don't play golf, and I'm okay with any of it.
Don't you do it, Chuck.
The club at Wildwood, Chet. Like Squirrel Sands.
It's like,
Club at Wakulla. Wakulla Sands is probably, the way we're designing it with ribs, there's going to be a lot of sand out there.
And let's say sands, I'm not thinking of the beach.
Okay, and so you can think of a beach, and you have a lot of playing off of beach. And so that's going to be an interesting.
Definitely some sand out there.
Yes,
I swear about it being a little too.
And but you could also do Wakulla Sands Golf Club, and that would be bring that, kind of put the two together.
I like it. I like it too. I like that. Wakulla Sands Golf Club at Swirl Swamp.
let's just incorporate them all.
Shorter the better.
Let's just incorporate them. Wakulla Sands Golf Club, can we have a combination if it's not on there?
You sure can. You can do whatever you like.
I'll write the rules.
Are you doing that? Is that
Go ahead, Chuck, you play golf, you don't have us play golf.
Oh, make the motion so they can hear it, so.
Motion is Wakulla Sands Golf Club.
Motion, okay, perfect.
Good.
Any discussion?
Do we have any citizens? Really? Further discussion from the board? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Very good.
Don't put a print in there, Chuck Hess down at the very bottom. Yeah, like Mike Stewart Drive, so we'll put Chuck Hess.
There you go. All right, that ends our general business. We have no public hearings, no planning and zoning, no commissioner agenda items. County attorney.
Nothing this evening.
County Administrator.
Yes, I have a plethora of things. I want to first thank Summer and Terracon for the work over the past year on the ordinance, or the regulation, I should say, and Heather, her firm does. There was a lot of back and forth, especially from our legal firm to our engineers and geologists. Everybody worked together and we did a really good job. And I understand there's some things that we can do better, and we're willing to do that. And like I said in my statement is we all want to have the setbacks, and we all care, and we all do. And it's really disappointing that all the conspiracy theories and all the stuff that is very unprofessional that people, and unfortunate that people bring that up. And it's disappointing in our society that comes up, and people really think that. It's really unfortunate, and we operate a very professional organization here, and we don't play those games. And not one time did we ask these guys to throttle something back or not do something. And to insinuate otherwise is very disingenuous and ignorant. And and personally attack Summer because of her doing her job and doing what you guys asked for. That's just silly people. And there's no sense in that in our society. And that's part of what's wrong with our society this day and time, is we should all agree, and we don't all have to agree, but let's just be respectful and not be vindictive and all this hatred. Good gosh, it's unbelievable. Anyway, I'm all for that. I just wanted to thank, but also it's important because our staff works hard, and we do the right thing every day, and we're honest, and we're very honest with what we do. But then we have, it's very frustrating, and we do the right thing every day, and to hear all the insinuations, and guy said, hey, you talked to the gas station guy. Come on. Yeah. Get real. And anyway, it's and insinuating that Summer is having emails with gas companies. Yeah, they asked for his ordinance. Yep, got it. But it was thrown out there as the county is involved. Come on, let's just be pros here. Anyway. All right. Anyway, next, well, we got a ways. Rock Landing. As I've told you all, we have a problem at the Rock Landing Marina with the parking. We have worked diligently with those involved down there to try to fix it, and we have exhausted all means of possibility. So therefore, we're bringing back an agenda item next meeting to have a remedy for that. That'll be on the agenda. Master Sands Pier, we've been asked for an update on that. The pier we're real close, very, very close. I know I've said this before, but every time we get there, it's almost like that thing that you can't quite reach. It keeps moving just a little bit further, but believe it or not, we had it. It's moved now to the last section of FEMA. And so we're waiting for that. And what it's going to do is the first one that was bid out and that was halfway constructed was about $2.7 million. FEMA and the DEM took it back and said, hey, we did some things wrong. We need to back up and reanalyze this. Anyway, what came out of that is now the project costs $3.7 million. But what we get out of that is a fully concrete pier versus just the piers, and it'll be a concrete deck with the flow-through decking down the middles. So therefore, it'll take some of that. We're hoping to have any day now that approval and be able to move forward with the project. But the good news is it'll be a stronger project. Hopefully the next storm doesn't blow it out, but it'll be fixed to that. So that's a positive thing. We have put it on your agendas, Wakulla Gardens Phase 4 meeting with the citizens on the 16th at 6:30 at the Community Center. And
what time was that again?
6:30.
And
we'll also be bringing another agenda item back to you probably in June. We made a mistake on the recent ordinance that we amended on the sewer, how we collect our sewer fees, especially up front, and we need to get that fixed. And telephone update, Verizon, I think, has gotten us all the information needed, and they've gotten their end straightened out, so we can give them the permits so that they can go ahead and make the additions at the Sopchoppy Tower and the Smith Creek Tower to go and make them live. So everything's here, it's just a matter of putting it all together. So, that's that.
David, what about Chuck's groundbreaking?
The Hess Sands.
Yeah, that place.
Yeah, we're having the groundbreaking. Thank you for that. That is,
You thought I was going to say
May 12th. What time, Kenzie?
3 p.m.
3 p.m. at the Wakulla Sands Golf Club. We will be there. We've invited the golf teams, DEP, and some other folks, whoever else, and we want to make it a good time, and please come out.
Chuck's wife's making some more candy. What was that little candy?
Coffee.
Chuck's going to have the first slice next in October.
Caramel. Chuck, caramel.
Okay. That's all I got.
Thank you, sir. Jessica, citizens to be heard? No. Discussion items from commissioners? Fred, you want to kick us off?
None. I'll talk to nothing.
I just have one thing to say. The session hopefully ends on Friday of this week. And as of right now, it looks like Wakulla County has some money in the budget, in the state budget. Anything can happen. I see Michelle back there cheering. She's the one that's been working it. She's the one that's been putting it hard and getting it to our legislative delegation. Representative Schoaf, Senator Simon, and our lobbyists have worked hard, and so far there's a good amount of money on the table. Hopefully it stays there, and then after that we gotta hope the governor doesn't veto it. So nobody make the governor
The EOC building, so we should be getting one.
How about all the
preemptions
that were in there? Oh, yeah, that's every year. Yeah. Did they all pass? No, I don't know the final on some of them. I'm not sure about the big one that we did the resolution on. Was it?
I was asking about it. I don't know.
I think that one died.
Yeah, I thought it.
Last time I looked at it, it got shoved.
Yeah. The term limits, that changed considerably. Last year, they put a 12-year term limit on school board. This year, they were coming back 12 years, or 8 years on school board, 8 years on county commission. County commission got stripped out, and so as it stands right now, it's 8 years on school board.
But there were a lot of preemptions. I was just wondering if you had a list on a.
I don't have a.
I'm sure our lobbyists will get those for us after Friday, maybe.
Well,
More like Tuesday or Wednesday.
wait and see what
Well, and hopefully
it makes past a bunch of pins.
Exactly.
it wraps up on Friday, because usually when it stays late, it just gets worse.
I know I've talked enough tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Sands?
I'm tired.
To adjourn.
Okay.
All right, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you all for coming out.
Thank y'all.